Good morning all and welcome to the Infrastructure Standing Committee meeting for Wednesday the 6th of July. Welcome to councillors, staff and community members who may be watching today. I'd like to open the meeting with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Okay, I don't believe there are any requests for leave of absence or apologies. So we'll now call on Councillor Duff to provide the recognition of traditional owners. And Councillor, perhaps you could also say, lead us in prayer for the late Ken Bone, former Mayor, Cherbourg Council, who sadly passed away recently. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to acknowledge that it's actually NAIDOC week, and we had a wonderful celebration yesterday at Cherbourg, and most of the councillors attended. It was, it's good to particularly remember and build relationships with our First Nations people, particularly as we celebrate NAIDOC week. I'd also like to acknowledge country and the traditional owners of the land where we meet this morning, the Waka Waka people, and acknowledge the elders both past, present and emerging. I'd also like to pay my respects and also to acknowledge the passing of the late Ken Bone, who was also the former mayor and councillor of the Cherbourg Council. Just like to extend our thoughts, our prayers, our deepest sympathy to his family, and hoping and praying that the former mayor and councillor and the wonderful community member Ken Bone, may his soul rest in peace. And perhaps it would be fitting to do, I think, Mayor Otto, a minute's silence for Ken Bone, but also for all of the Indigenous people that have passed away in our community, in the Cherbourg community, and because they've had a lot of sorry business over a long period. So I just think it would be fitting for us in NAIDOC week to have a minute's silence for all those First Nations people in our community who have passed.
Okay, thank you, councillors. Councillors, are there any declarations of conflict of interest for today's agenda? Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'd like to declare a conflict of interest for item 6.4 on the agenda in relation to the updated information on unmaintained roads being requested for upgrade works. I've noted on page 73 of the agenda that Staines Road, Blackbutt, has been listed. I own a property on Staines Road, at 60 Staines Road. Currently, I believe council does maintain the stretch of road in front of my property up to my gateway. However, beyond that, there is the section that's being referred to in this report is a section that it's a missing link for the residential properties at the back of Benarkin, who have put forward that request so that they could, in the case of a bushfire, easily leave via Staines Road, because there's only one access into those properties. So I do not feel that my interest, given that this is a discussion around a regional program, that I have no greater interest than anyone else in the region. and I do feel that I can exercise my judgment to the benefit of the community. However, would of course like to raise that conflict of interest and like to leave that with council to make the decision as to whether I can stay in the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any further declarations of conflict of interest? If not, we'll ask Councillor Shoemaker to leave the room while we attend to that matter. Thank you, Councillor. Okay. Councillors, considered the information our colleagues provided. Do we have a motion from the floor? Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that Councillor Shoemaker stay in the room because I do not believe that her interest is any greater or lesser than anyone else in the community. Thank you, Mr
Councillor.
Mayor.
Seconder, Councillor Henson. Okay. Any concerns? If not, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. We bring Councillor back. Thank you, Tim. Note that Councillor Shoemaker has returned and that the committee has resolved. Councillor may participate in item 6.4. Moving on to 5.1, minutes of the previous meeting, contained at 5. It's recommended that the minutes of the Infrastructure Standing Committee meeting held on the 1st of June 2022 be received. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Potter. Seconded, Councillor Henson. Any concerns? No? We'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. 6.1. Now I'd like to welcome Councillor Jones to provide his roads and drainage portfolio report as presented at page 18. Thank you, Councillor Jones.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. And again, quite happy to present the roads and drainage portfolio report for the month of July. I'll present it as read, but I just want to highlight a few things through there. The current design and planning projects that have underway, the Maidenmore Bunyan Mountains Road, Wengenville, detailed design is 95% complete. Cumbia Streetscape, 80% complete. George Street Car Park, 90% complete. The minor projects, Corndale Road, Memorandum, design 10%. River Road, Siphon, 90%. Leopard Court, Kingaroy, 60%. Gordon Brook Water Storage, 40% complete. We go through, there's a whole list that's there for everyone to see on the website. The agendas will be on the website there. All our capital works programs, they're all underway. Elbow Road, Merlewood, John Street, Kingaroy, Palmer Street, East Mergen, Weckers Road, Warulin. We go through the gravel resheeting also. There's a list of roads there. Our patrol grading, prior to the most recent significant rainfall across the region, an interim patrol grading program had been established to allow crews to commence on roads that were unaffected by past weather events. Council's road network has again sustained damage to the unsealed network through its 4th weather event. Emergency works inspections across the network have commenced and crews are being prioritised to roads across the region. Probably a good point, Mr Mayor, at that stage to highlight that we have 950 roads in our region that currently or are underway with inspection for flood damage. So a big job there for our staff. Our completed works for noting there, you can see the capital works program, Cumbia Road, Memorandum, Barkers Creek Road. Our roadside slashing, again, a whole list of programs there. Our CRM's financial year, you can see that We've gone through there. You've got a graph that everyone can see, our financial year CRMs, all there for everyone to see. An update there on the Blackbutt, our recent storm damage and flood response. Our South Burnett Road Submission 1 contract overview. That included Ironpot Road, Burrabri Road, Wicks, Edenvale South, Old Proston, Melrose, Weens, Manar, Red Hill and Smiths Road. And then the list goes on. Springs Road, it's table 2 there. It's all there to see. To date, approximately $3.2 million has been spent across the 3 events. The QRA has provided grant advances and a 30% payment on the first REPA submission, totalling approximately $2.9 million. Another $2 million in payments are expected before the end of June, comprising grant advance for May event and 30% payment on the second REPA submission. The emergency works and immediate reconstruction works claims are currently being prepared for submission by the QRA, and Council is undertaking additional Rackus Road inspections to further capture evidence of damage across the network, which will support DRFA submissions, and a review of data is underway to identify any roads that will need to be re-inspected due to the May event. Again, Mr Mayor, I'll keep saying it needs to be put out there. I have a number of people that we talk to on a regular occasion that really don't understand the process with our road network. They see the staff go out doing repairs, and as we all know in here, but not out there, we can only fix the road to a safe standard. We can't go and complete the roadworks until we have approval from the federal and Commonwealth governments for the flood damage. And as I stated through there, nearly $20 million worth of road damage that we have at the moment identified, and we'll be asking for recovery works money for that. So for the people out there, it's not that we're just sending the crews out and they're doing a half-hearted job. It's the fact that that's what they're instructed to do. That's what we're working under. We have to wait for full declaration for federal and Commonwealth to support that, and then we can go back and complete the roadworks. And unfortunately, the poor men and women out there, they're just chasing their tail, because every time they're starting to get on top of it, we get smashed with more rain and we go back to where we started from. So just a little bit, again, just to do that. And then we've got another upgrade there for the Blackbutt CBD streetscape and footpath. If anyone's driven through Blackbutt lately, it's really starting to take shape, and it's a credit to the contractors and the council staff that are doing the work down there. And the Blackbutt people are certainly coming on board with it and appreciate what the council has supported all the way through. So again, I'd like to congratulate the staff, both inside and outside again, for doing a wonderful job serving the community and the ratepayers. And on that, Mr Mayor, I'd like to move that my portfolio for roads and drainage be accepted for the month of July.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Duff. Speakers? Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just have a question about the 950 roads. I know that there was a flood in December, and then there's been one in January and February and another one in May, but I'm just concerned about the whole 950 roads, the length of time that that's going to take. Wondering whether the 950 came out of the first flood, because I know that the floods of late have been mostly in Division 5 in my area. It seems to have been repetitive there. Just wondering, yes, where did the 950 roads come from and how long that is going to take? Just my concern for the whole road network, my concern for the community waiting for those roads to get fixed, and by the time we assess 950 roads, the mind boggles as to how long that's going to take. So just the question is, how do we get those 950 roads, and how long is that going to take?
Thanks, General Manager. Through you.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So with the May event, we're essentially looking at the entire network again, and so we're aware that some roads had no damage, and that's particularly through the emergency inspections. So we're actually going through looking at the emergency type works that we need to get on top of, and then there's another inspection process, which is the restoration, a more formal and a more detailed assessment of the individual roads, and that's the REPA, or the Restoration of Essential Public Assets submission. And so that's where we end up with a significant number, 950 roads, in terms of the REPA submission. But essentially, it's looking at the entire the entire network, and again, there's roads that aren't on, didn't receive significant damage, and there's certainly areas that the focus of the flood damage is. In terms of the timing, we've engaged a contractor to assist in undertaking the inspections. It is a time consuming process. We're also using RACUS in attempt to speed up the process. So we can use RACUS as a desktop inspection, which saves time. We're probably looking at least another 3 months in terms of getting our inspections and REPA assessments done. In terms of the time that it's going to take to fix the roads, officially we have 2 financial years to do the repairs. There's a desire to get the work done as quickly as we can, and you see that we've got 1 submission in train, contractor engaged. Second submission is currently been approved and out for invitation to offer for interested contractors to assist, and there'll be a few other submissions that will happen as we progress through the inspections and completion of the submissions.
Stay with you, Councillor Duff. Thank you.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that there's an expectation from the community that we would grade every road once a year. And I know that now, because of the flood work and the 950 roads, that's being held up, because I've seen reports that the graders are sort of on hold until we get all that happening. So as we go through those 950 and we start to work out which ones are not included in the flood restoration, are we hooking in then and grading those roads, or where are we at with the actual grading program? Thank you.
Thanks, Manager.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So in terms of the grading program, the service level that we have is 1 grade per year. That's obviously put on hold. Prior to the May event, we were looking and had created a draft patrol grading schedule for roads that had not been impacted, and obviously we've had our 4th event, which has curtailed those plans. So certainly there's when there's an opportunity that we would be looking to reinstate the patrol grading program when we can, particularly roads that don't have the flood damage on them. You may see that as we get towards the end of the emergency period, which is 3 months from each event. So our May event, August is the time period we have to complete our emergency works, and that's where we find our 3 patrol graders that potentially frees them up from at least the emergency type works. And so we may find that coming into to August, September, that there's some reprieve in terms of getting the patrol grading back to some semblance of what it used to be. But certainly I would expect over at least the next 12 months there's going to be a fairly disruptive patrol grading in terms of we've got significant amounts of flood damage happening on particular roads, and we want to try and avoid tripping over the works, patrol grading and the construction crews. But certainly where particular roads don't have that flood damage work occurring, then we're mindful that we don't want to leave those particular roads with no service, reflective of the 12-month 1 patrol grade per 12 months.
Thank you. Just to further question through you, Mr Mayor, to Acting General Manager Tim. So yesterday I identified, a couple of days ago actually, Gallagher Street off the Bunya Highway has that great big hole that is causing all sorts of grief to the haulage depot. And I'm just wondering, can that be included in emergency work to fix that big hole? Because it's causing a lot of problems with the trucks turning into that particular area.
Thanks, General Manager.
Through you, Mayor. Just for clarification, that's the one on the Bunya, right on the intersection, Councillor. Where Kev might be able to answer that for me, but it is actually on the list for the flood rectification. I actually drove through that myself yesterday. It is quite deep, but I'd take it on advice from Kev, seeing that it's not actually on the it's on a turn off into a cul-de-sac type setup. Maybe Kev can advise better.
We would certainly look to see if it's eligible under flood damage. If it's not, then any restoration would obviously be under council maintenance.
Thank you, Manager. Councillor Erkin.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. I just wondered, so at the moment it's not actually a flood, but the rain that we're having at the moment is really deteriorating some of the roads that already have potholes on them. So what do they come out under for fixing them?
Oh, that's correct. So it's unless there's a declared event, then it wouldn't be eligible for additional flood or storm damage under an additional event. But there is scope to do repairs with our current declared event, which is we're calling it event number 4, or the May event. So if there's emergency type works that need to be undertaken, then there's still opportunity under that particular event.
Because there are a number of roads now that are really, with the current rain, and especially because it's not runoff rain, so it's mainly sitting there, and any dirt that's on the road becomes a big slush pile. But you know, there are a number of places that are pretty bad at the moment.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. You'll probably find, Councillor, most of those will actually have been picked up in their round 4 damage, so they will be covered for the majority, not all. Yeah.
Thank you, Managers. Okay, Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Jones, for your report. Page 24 of the report, there's just a comparison of the customer requests for the financial year versus last financial year, and I can see there is quite a significant increase in the number of requests we received. I had a couple of questions in relation to that. I fully appreciate we've had 4 flood events, and that could be one of the root causes why we've received more requests through our system. I'm just mindful of resources and service levels, and I'm mindful, I would really like to see actually a comparison for the year before to see if there has been a dramatic increase, or whether, you know, last year we performed better, like just to make some further analysis around this. My thinking is more around sustainable resources, the service levels that we provide. Are they meeting the needs and expectations of our community? Or is this increase because of those flood events and the significant damage to our network? So I was keen to hear from you in relation to any trends or insights that you might have that sort of quantifies that increase in the number of requests. And if there is any specific feedback, I'm probably interested in maybe even doing a bit of a review once we bring the budget down. Is there any specific feedback in relation to, you know, our maintenance system or approach that we should consider, some of those learnings from this process? Because, you know, we're looking at here just under 4,000 customer requests, so that's 4,000 touch points with our local community around issues or concerns, or sometimes I know there are compliments, far and few, but sometimes a few. Just really would like to better understand that data and would be interested in any insights you have in relation to the report. Manager Lowe or Manager Kevin?
Yeah, through you. Thanks, Acting General Manager. Manager.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, certainly we can look at the 1920 customer requests and include that in the next Infrastructure Standing Committee if we've got the data, which I'm sure we do, to provide some context. But what we find over the last 6 months is a huge amount of customer requests coming through for drainage and flood-related type damage, and that's certainly put us somewhat of a strain on resources, but it very much is flood-related, and there is an expectation that will eventually drop off if we get some better weather, and certainly 4 declared events within the space of 6 months is very unusual and a little bit unprecedented in a lot of areas as well. That's what we take away from the increase in customer requests is the drainage, is the damage, all flood related.
Yeah, thank you for the update. Certainly I think that information, if it's easy to access, it'd just be interesting to have a look at that trend for the 1920 year. And I do think this is something maybe when we've got a bit of breathing space from the many things, many balls in the air in relation to responding to the flood events. I would really like to spend some time with council just workshopping what some of these customer requests relate to and our current service levels, and just that bigger picture consideration of how we extract certainly best value for money, but also take some of this feedback on board and I guess equip our team for the future. So and I'm even thinking, should we just progressively have them increase is not really sustainable, I think, into the future. So I'd like to certainly acknowledge that the flood event could be a root cause for this. However, it will take us some time to recover. And I guess I was just thinking about that bigger picture, the systems and services that we provide and how we can take some of this feedback on board, and if some of it may be relevant in terms of equipping us for the next 12 months ahead. Unfortunately, I think unprecedented weather conditions will be our new norm in the coming years from the looks of the projections ahead. So thank you for the report.
Yes, thank you, Manager. Just further speakers. Councillor Henson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you. Yes, thank you, Councillor Jones and Councillor Shoemaker. I just would like it noted that we've experienced the most unprecedented season for probably 40 years. Now, machinery can't, and I read the slashing program and the grading program, slashers just can't get on the side of the roads. The roads are just oozing water out of them. Graders can't get on roads because there's water running down the table drains. There's been 30 mil of rain in my neck of the woods, and I believe Councillor Duff in a conversation, there was some 60 odd mil up in your neck of the woods. 30 mil of rain in my neck of the woods, run the Boyne River and the Jumma Creek. 30 mil, run them again. That's what we saw as kids. We talk about, when I was a kid. That's all it took. We're back to that at the moment, where the Boyne River run and the Jumma Creek, which is the headwaters up here that I cross every day, run with 30 mil of rain. Didn't flood, they're not massive floods, but they run. Now, the roads that I traverse on regularly, I went up the Old Wandai Road yesterday. It's unbelievable. There's water just oozing. We've gone from a season where our primary producers have experienced what was going to be probably one of their best seasons, or a couple, in a long, long time, to be absolutely destroyed by the weather events. There's a flow-on effect. We can't get machinery, and I hope the public acknowledge that we can't get machinery on certain things at certain times, and they're predicting the rest of the year to be wet. So there needs to be some patience, and the guys out there on the ground, they're trying, but it's a fairly thankless task at the moment, I can tell you. So it just needs to be noted that these conditions are something we haven't seen for probably 40-odd years, and forget the flood events of 10, 11 and 13, they were catastrophic, of course. But look what's happening in New South Wales at the moment, and North Queensland and down our own coastline. So, yeah, I'd just like to note that when you ask when the roads can be done, that's an unknown. That is an unknown, because if it keeps raining in August and through to October, guys, spare a thought for what our road network might be like then. So, yeah, it's a trying time, that's for sure. So, appreciate a little bit of patience. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Duff, what else have you got for us?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering, further from what Councillor Shoemaker said about resources, is it true that we have a team called Red Frost that go in and they've been assessing all of our road network? Do they also do the emergency work assessment? And what is the process for a councillor to put forward roads that they believe need to be in the emergency list before August? Because I've got people that can't access their properties because the road's so damaged. So what is the process for a councillor to get some roads or potholes or whatever onto an emergency list?
Thank you, Manager.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So Red Frost have been engaged as project managers to manage the flood damage task. And part of their role is to assist in doing the initial inspections, as well as preparing or assisting in the submissions, liaising with QRA, Queensland Reconstruction Authority, and administering the contracts that are let. We've currently got a couple of contracts that contractors are undertaking the work, so they're assisting in the supervision and project management of those, and they will also look at doing the claim or assisting in the claims and the tail end of the project. So they're not physically doing the work, they're essentially our project managers for that. In terms of the specific roads that councillors may have and believe that they're part of an emergency type work, my suggestion is to go through our council customer request system, the same as you would for a normal request. If it's deemed flood damage, then that'll be assessed as part of our process. If it's not deemed to be flood damage, then it will make its way into the normal maintenance. But certainly the best way, my advice is through your normal customer request.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Manager. Okay, Councillor Erkins, further.
Just while we're on that about where you report things to, I'm finding, and I understand the difference between instructing a staff member, but there's also an inquiry or notifying. For example, yesterday, a resident in Nanango rang me about a road that she felt it was dangerous when she'd gone across it, and she just wanted council notified so that they could check it and see whether they needed some signs or something to put up. So I'm not really sure of the process. So I tried to contact Mark and he was in a meeting. I tried to contact Tim, who was also in a meeting, but I just find it very cumbersome when this, from what I was told, it was an emergency in the fact that they felt it was dangerous. They didn't want any work done. They just wanted some signs or something up. And I just find the whole process of where you've got to go to and what you've got to do, very time consuming. And I also feel very bad when I'm contacting General Manager or the CEO over things that I think are probably quite trivial, when if I could just go and let somebody know. And as I said, I'm not talking about instructing staff, I'm just talking about notifying. It just seems to be a very cumbersome process for getting anything done. I just can't understand that.
Yes, Councillor, our accept or request guidelines, I think you'll find is the policy that sets down the process whereby one submits a customer request. In terms of those more emergent matters, Mr. CEO, what would your advice be there?
Mayor, anytime there's an emergency, we're happy to take the call. And when I rang the councillor back, there was actually signage on it. It was signed at 60. We got the signage dropped to 40. There was already passed it on to our administration staff here while I followed up with the phone call in the office of the CEO. Bron rang the switch, and we got, there was already a customer request in the system, so someone had reported it, which was great, and so the signs were to go up and it was going to be dropped back to 40. So any of those emergency ones, always happy to take the call. The only issue is that we may be somewhere that we can't just take the call straight away, so the main switch number is often the best and easiest way to get it through. If it is an emergency, certainly the staff in there asked to be put through to Linnell or Bron or one of those, and then they can follow it up or track us down. They're more than welcome.
Can I just answer?
Yeah, so
I'm not, I don't have an issue with what happened yesterday. That's not the point. But the point is sometimes there are things that you believe are an emergency, and I don't even know where the customer request forms are, but sometimes, when you're out and someone says to you, look, this is really dangerous, there's a lot of traffic use that road, I would feel absolutely, devastated if I hadn't got time or I didn't know where the forms were, or by the time the forms went through. There are occasions where things are pretty important to get through, and I'm just worried that I'm contacting the wrong person, because I've heard so much about this is the process of how it's got to go. And I just wanted to clarify whether I'll get into trouble if I rang and said, I want to speak to so-and-so, because sometimes by the time it goes through, the girl on the desk and somebody else, a lot of times, passes. So I'm just trying to clarify that I am able to speak to someone about
Thank you,
that.
councillor. I can clarify this for you. So this is a governance matter in relation to our council's policy around this. So I think it's fairly clear that process for submitting a customer request can be quite simple. You can call it into the front desk, or you can send an email to customer search. So what I would normally do is just send an email to customer search, and then follow that up with, I'd suggest if it's an emergency, a phone call to the office of the CEO, as the CEO's indicated. So a phone call to the office of the CEO. So ring the front desk, ask to be put through to the CEO's office, to exec services, and then make the staff there aware that it's an emergency matter, and then they will pick it up and manage it out of your office. You comfortable with that, Mr. CEO? Yeah, so that's probably a good point of learning for all of us. If you do have emergencies, straight through to the exec services team, and they'll follow it through the correct department as a matter of priority. So hopefully that clarifies. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just page 29, it was remiss of me, just wanted to highlight how exciting it is to see the Black Butt project come together. I see, Councillor Jones, that we've got there that the Les Muller Works component will be complete by the 30th of September. I'm just really mindful of the Black Butt Avocado Festival and the opportunity to celebrate the work that's been done in Black Butt, and to really, together with our community, acknowledge the work that's been done, but certainly how just much more beautiful my hometown does look. So I was just wondering, probably a question to you in terms of, have there been any conversations around an opportunity to officially open, or to the works that are completed there in Black Butt, or to work in with the festival and to do something to celebrate the work that's been done? Has there been anything sort of discussed in your neighbourhood, or is this something that maybe we as a council could work on over the next coming months? Just really open to your feedback there, and the feedback of the community of Black Butt.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Councillor Jones, you might like to reply. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. Very good point. To this stage, no, there hasn't been any conversation around that, and I'll certainly take that on board and work with Jeff Connor and the Black Butt Avocado Festival and and have a chat with our project managers and all that sort of stuff and see if we can organise something. Fantastic idea. So no, take that on board, and at this stage, no conversation. No.
If you could just channel that through the office of the CEO as well. Thank you, councillor, in terms of our process. Thank you, councillors. Just on page 19, General Manager, there's the current design and planning projects. Under the key projects, we've got the Cumbia Streetscape. I'm just wondering if you could just perhaps give us an update. I know we provided a commitment to the Cumbia community to have that completed prior to Christmas 2022. Are we going to be in a position to see the works completed by Christmas 2022?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're just in the process of finalising the design, coordinating the civil design with the landscape design, and we would be hoping to have the design fully complete within the next couple of weeks.
And that being the case, General Manager, will we expect that the works would be completed on that basis by December? In light of what's been happening in recent times around the floods, particularly.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, I'll just get Kev to see if he can answer that one.
We haven't looked at the construction timeframe at this stage, and in particular, how we actually what crews are going to complete that works. But certainly we can look at that and see what options are available for getting that done before Christmas, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Manager. I will just, Mr. CEO, if we could just note there is a resolution of council to have it done by December 22. So it would be my expectation that resolution is appropriately implemented as being directed by the council. And if it can't be, if we could please be informed of such. December 2022. Correct. Sorry, not 23. 22. Just the other one was just on for me on.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, can I just interject in relation to the Cumbia?
Yeah, certainly, councillor.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry to interrupt, but we've had conversations with the Cumbia community, and part of that project and that we have discussed before is Cumbia is having their 100-year centenary on the 4th of September. So part of that Cumbia Streetscape is to also work around whether that's going to be completed before the 4th. Well, the last thing we want to do is have something in the middle of a project in Cumbia and their centenary is on the 4th. So that's in discussions as well. So if it's not been able to be completed by the 4th of September, the conversation's been had that it will be after that centenary weekend.
If we can make sure we're communicating with the community appropriately, that would be much appreciated. Thank you, councillor. Just on page 25, reference is made in the first paragraph to the trigger point payments of $212,168 per event. Now, we know there from that report that there's now 4 events, and by my calculation, that would give rise to a liability to council of $850,000 should we not be successful in getting some, I suppose, merging of one or more, of 2 or more events. I suppose the questions, 2 questions. Number one, where are we at in terms of our approaches to the QRA in relation to those trigger point issues? And number 2, has the $850,000 been factored into our statement of comprehensive income for the 22-23 budget? Thank you, General Manager.
Yep. In terms of the trigger points, there's ongoing discussions with QRA about those 4 events and whether there's an opportunity to merge them, for want of a better word. We are looking at reducing some of the expenses for 1 or 2 of the events on the basis that you have damage in some of the earlier events and the later events almost supersede. So what you find is, say, event 2, which is our January event, is there's likely to be it's likely not to reach the trigger point. So on that basis, you may not exceed, or may not be a requirement to have that $850,000. But certainly there's an expectation that there will at least be the three events and the 3 trigger points. But in terms of the QRA discussion, it is ongoing, and I believe we actually had a QRA representative attend our fortnightly flood damage meeting and spoke about the trigger points, and there's probably work still in the background to happen in that respect.
Thank you, Manager. Of course, we've made representation to Major General Elwood in relation to this, as well as to Brendan Moon, the head of the QRA, as a council. So we are hopeful that that's not falling on deaf ears, and that we get a result in this regard that's going to be something around common sense when we've had so many events happen so closely. That being the case, have we factored these trigger point costs into our budget for 22-23 in terms of what's coming to the table on Friday?
I'd have to take that on notice, Mr Mayor. I don't know what discussions Kev's had with unless Kev can answer that.
Through you, Mr Mayor, just talking with Kerry yesterday, she had accounted for the 3. There were 3 trigger points that have been accounted for, and there was on the basis that the 4th event, or one of the events of the 4, hadn't had significant expenditure to date. So that was the basis for the 3 that's been accounted for.
Yeah, thank you for confirming such, Manager. The other one was on page 27. In the first paragraph there, references made to another $2 million in payments are expected before the end of June, because we're now into July. Have we received those, have we received that extra $2 million? Has that come into Council's funds, do we know? Have QRR paid that $2 million?
Not that I can take that on notice, Mr Mayor, not that I'm aware of at the moment.
Thank you. If we could perhaps just follow that up in terms of its, I suppose, just to ensure that we have received that, or we are at least following that money up, and how that reflects in our financials. Thank you. Okay. Anything further there, Manager?
Yeah, the additional $2 million had been approved, but just in terms of the timing of payment, happy to follow up with Kerry.
I'd imagine, Manager, that would that funding being tied funding would be recognised in the year to which it applies. So how is that recognised as revenue?
Man, can I assist too? Just with the trigger points, they will actually. You're absolutely correct in that regard, and the trigger points will actually have been accounted for in this financial year. So those three won't have an impact on next year's budget. If a 4th one comes through, well, yeah, okay, we'll have to play in that space when we get there. But and certainly it's under consideration for the next year's budget. But the 3, there's been an accounting understanding that the 3 will be impacting, and that will be in this year's end of year results.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. And if we could perhaps just have a look at that $2 million in terms of how it will be accounted for in our revenue statement, in our revenue income statement. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, I've just received notice that we've received some, and we only got notification yesterday that we'll be receiving the remainder of that $2 million for the QRA funding. So that'll be a contract liability.
Okay, so that'll be a contract liability that'll come in July. Thank you. Okay, anything further, councillors? Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to, this is probably a big question on notice, but the Darley Crossing Road had, when I was first elected and we closed Innes Bridge, we made a commitment to that community that we would keep that road a bit above average standard because of the inconvenience of closing that bridge. And it's in a mess at the moment. I've had contact from ratepayers in that area, and I'm just wondering, in which round are we including Darley Crossing Road in our submissions when we put in those REPA submissions?
Thank you, Manager.
As indicated in the report, that Darley Estate or Darley Crossing? Darley Crossing, okay. Yep, I would need to take that one on notice, councillor. I'm happy to provide some additional information. Yep.
Thank you.
May need to submit that, council, as a customer request if maybe it may be eligible for emergent works pre-9 August, perhaps if it is a part of event number 4. Okay, anything further, councillors? If not, sorry, General Manager, thank you.
Through you, Mayor. Just a quick update on the question about the customer requests. I can advise that last year, the 1920 year was 2,590 customer requests, so pretty consistent to the 2021 year.
Thank you, General Manager. Okay, let's go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. 6.2 is in relation to the North Street curb and channeling. It's at page 30. And General Manager, would you be so kind as to give us an overview of your report? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, we met on site, the Mayor and myself and Manager Searle, to have a look at different options for the kindergarten drainage issues. And so we've come up with some options, and I'll leave it to hand over to Kev to go through the detail of the devil in the detail, please.
Thanks, Tim. So on the final page, there's just a little photo of North Street, and it might just provide some context about what we're looking at. So on the right hand side, there's existing curb and channel. On the left hand side, there's two accesses there, and they both access the kindergarten. And there's concern about water coming down from the far end, from First Avenue down, and essentially hitting the first driveway, and then ponding there, and also diverting the stormwater flow into the kindergarten space. So the proposal there is to formalise, is to look at how we improve the drainage on that left-hand side. There's a couple of options that I've proposed. One is just essentially an earthen grade, improving the existing drainage through there, and the more permanent solution there is a concrete curb. I've also looked at an invert as well, which is a little bit of a different shape to your normal curb, a little bit more expensive, but it does provide perhaps a greater body of water to be able to flow through there. One of the issues there is the driveway is probably both driveways are a little bit higher than the surrounding area, which does exacerbate the stormwater issues that they're experiencing. So yeah, it's quite a brief report there, and it does just provide a little bit of information on that. And the recommendation is for council to look at that perhaps in the first quarter.
Thank you, Manager. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, after sort of knowing that area pretty well, I know 80 metres is a great distance in front of the kindy, but if we don't go that extra 10 metres in front of the next residential property, we will actually have that same issue, I think, because they have a similar drain to the Is that correct? Because the next property down doesn't have a pipe either. So, and I'm thinking we're just going to back up that issue and bring it down further. So I'm just wondering whether we should take it that extra 10 metres and do the 90, or just at least pass that first driveway, Kev, but I would, yeah. I would
So
just like to hear what
thank you, councillor. So the backyard of the Scouts,
So there's
is
two
on the
properties
corner.
before that. The backyard of the Scouts actually it's got a decent drainage thing, I think, there. But there's two, after the kindy, there are two properties, I think. So, and one of those properties already has a pipe through their driveway, if I remember rightly, and the other one doesn't. The one beside the kindy, I don't think does.
Yeah, my understanding was that 80 metres would take it certainly down to the Scouts area, well past those two properties, councillor.
Is that correct?
That was what in my original motion, I had actually measured it out to be 70 metres to the water course, the natural water flow into the Scouts, but 80 metres would certainly cover that. Manager?
Yeah, so the 80 metres covers the kindergarten, and then you've got the driveway right next to the kindergarten, which is just outside of that photo. If we went another 10 metres, essentially going 90 metres, that would encompass that. So you've still got a way to go before you get down to the next driveway, which is the piped driveway.
That's interesting. So what distance would that be? I certainly measured 70 metres to the Scouts floodway, natural floodway. So I'm surprised, but certainly happy to take that if that's the case.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I think, without preempting the answer, I think that length of curb that we're talking will be the turnouts at the roundabout as well. So that will shorten up. So I suspect, correct me, Mayor, you've measured from the corner down to past the kindergarten, not the turnout. Is that right?
Yeah, I think the existing curb actually comes into the roundabout just to the turn. So I'm surprised, but look, yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement with Councillor Shoemaker. If we're going to do it, we need to make sure it goes past those properties. Councillor Potter, sorry. My apologies. Councillor Potter, down past those properties and make sure it goes at least down to the Scouts area so we can get that water away into the natural water course. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We'll take that on advice and we'll double check for us.
Councillors, I'd like to put forward a motion as follows, Bree, if I could then, in relation to this matter, that the committee recommends to council that council completes the North Street curb and channelling upgrading as part of its capital works program in 2022/23 and allocates the required funding in the 2022/23 CapEx budget, in brackets, from council funds. Before finalising that motion, is it possible to provide a budget estimate to take it down further, Manager, to where Councillor Potter's indicating to the Scouts area? Would we know what that would approximately be to extend it from the 80 metres? Just in terms of a notional budget for our
I need to
finance?
confirm the lengths, sorry, Mr Mayor,
Yeah.
to go down to the Scout Hall. I can do that during the day.
It'd be really appreciated if you don't mind, and so we can inform our finance staff.
Yep.
So that it can be considered as part of the budget on Friday, perhaps, if that's appropriate, Mr CEO.
Mayor, we can. The actual, probably the documentation that you'll get on Friday won't have it in. Certainly the resolution. And I suppose this is the practical, because this will go to the, I'm just thinking of the mechanics of it, Mayor, not the intent. The practical allocation of this resolution, it will be, council picks what it wants to do, curb and channel or V-drain, whichever. It'll go to the July ordinary, it'll get a head of power. The actual mechanics of it will end up in the first quarter anyway. So council we can have those numbers and have them, but it won't get life so easily on Friday.
Thanks, Mr. C. I'm happy,
Yeah.
if that's the case, happy for it to go to the July ordinary and then it can be factored in as part of a budget revision. In the first quarter.
Certainly will give us a head of power to get in and give it a get started on it.
Get started on the work,
But yeah,
thank you.
so Mayor, do apologise, but I just don't know how easily. I'll have a think, but how we would get it done for Friday.
Oh, look, no need to panic, Mr. C. Happy for that to come through to the July ordinary. So I'd like to now move that. Do we have a seconder? Seconder, Councillor Potter. Happy with that, Mr. CEO? Yep. Okay, happy with that. So Councillor Potter has seconded. I'll now speak to the motion. The not-for-profit committee at the Kindy and Kingaroy have been advocating for this, or have been raising this drainage issue, not advocating, raising this drainage issue for some time. And Jacqueline Campbell from the Kindy has certainly led the charge on this. And having been there and had a look at it, it certainly, the water flow does result in significant inundation into the area where the children actually play. So when it rains and it floods, the kids actually can't go outside for health and safety reasons. So I think that they have a large kindy. They have a number of people that often can't even get it into the driveway when they go to pick the kids up. And I think with the weather patterns we're now seeing, it's really important that council, I feel, I've heard the discussions this morning around weather events and around we're expecting more rain, and this is going to be sort of maybe part of the new way of life into the future. But council, I believe we need to certainly seriously consider our investment in drainage infrastructure right across the region to be able to accommodate these changing weather patterns that we're seeing with these consistent rainfall events, whether that be concrete causeways or whether that be more pipes or investing more in table drains and tail drains on our unsealed roads, concrete inverts in some of the gullies. I think we're going to need to seriously look at our drainage infrastructure into the future to manage this new environment. And similarly in our town environment, our curb and channeling infrastructure or whatever's appropriate so that we don't have consistent water inundation. So, look, on behalf of the people at the Kingaroy Kindy, I'd like to put that forward and recommend it to the committee for consideration. Further speakers? Councillor Jones.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it's not that I'm against it at all, fully support it, but I just, in my recollections in the last 2 years, I thought this council was heading down the way of trying to get costings and doing all that sort of stuff, having that all. I'm expecting a very similar motion put forward on 6.5, to be honest with you, in the agenda. And I just, not against that either, but I just want to, my concerns are that we're just coming out of the capital budget. Council, we've already dipped into our cash already, and again, I just bring it back to when we started, the way this council was heading and all that sort of stuff. This just goes completely opposite to what I thought we were trying to achieve as far as projects. Now, I know it's only a small project and I fully support it, that it gets done, but I'd just like to see our Kev's manager has just indicated that he can get an upgrade or an upgraded costing and all that sort of stuff moving forward. And I'd like to just see that we have those costings put in so that we know what we're actually moving forward. It may only cost 50,000, but it could cost 120. And we're just, and I stress again, I'm fully supportive of doing it, but it just goes against what I think this council has been trying to achieve in the last 2 years. That's my only, I just wanted to raise that as a concern. And we're talking about bringing it back into the July meeting and all that sort of stuff and having budgetary discussions and that further on, just give it a head of power. I just have concerns. Yeah, anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Further speakers? Councillor Atkins.
Through you, Mr Mayor, when you talked about, Councillor Potter talked about bringing it down past the house next door, and there was talk about going further, the curb and guttering go on the opposite side of the road, goes down past the house next door but doesn't continue any further.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Certainly fully aware of the issue and certainly actually many years ago it was one of those parents dropping off their kids traipsing through the mud into that kindergarten. Certainly understand the issue. My question was around the picture here and my drive around that part of town. I was curious as to why that one side of the road has curb and channeling and why the other side doesn't. I'm just curious, I guess the mind boggles, but in looking around that area, there are significant drainage issues or concerns when there are flows of water around that side of town. And I'm just wondering, have we done a bit of an audit? Like, do we know how many kilometres of curb is actually missing from that part of Kingaroy, or why, we have situations like this where one side has a curb and others do not? I guess is my question. I'm just very interested in your insights, General Manager Searle.
Thank you, Manager.
To answer the first question, no, I don't know why we've got one on the other. The only difference is that there seems to be residential on one side, perhaps. But no, I don't know why. What historically has gone on there, and there are other sections in Kingaroy, other towns without curb and channel, and perhaps it's an historical thing, and at the moment we're looking at probably more renewals than bringing those missing links into the program.
Thank you, Manager. Further speakers? Okay, probably just wrap up by saying that I think we've probably considered this. In my view, this has been well considered. I think the last motion was that Council obtains prices for both the V-drain and curb and channeling for North Street and report back to the July committee meeting. So that was Councillor Potter's resolution that was adopted at the last meeting. And you can see that on page 31 of the agenda. So I do believe that's what the staff have done. I know we're asking them to extend it, but I wouldn't be expecting, Councillor Jones, that an extra 20 or 30 metres or whatever it's going to be would increase the cost from 50 to 100 or anything exorbitant. So I think at some point in time we have to progress projects with the best case estimate of what our staff think it will cost. And if they're not material in cost, I mean, if this was 500,000 or 5 million, I'd probably be reconsidering it. But when we're talking 50 versus 60 or 70,000, my view is that we should move forward, progress this matter and get this done before we have any further weather events that are going to cause problems for the kindergarten. So I'll wrap up there and we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Okay, Councillor Shoemaker, Councillor Duff, Councillor Potter, Councillor Henson and Councillor Otto. Those against? Councillor Erkins and Councillor Jones. Thank you. So that's been carried. We'll now move on to Queensland Reconstruction Authority process for betterment at 33. Thank you, Manager Searle. If you could give us an overview, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So providing some update, some information perhaps on the betterment program through the Queensland Reconstruction Authority. The latest guidelines came out on the weekend. This report refers to the previous guidelines. They're very similar in terms of their the assessment of projects and the various criteria. And typically there's some option analysis, cost benefit analysis, details of resilience outcomes, and results of investigation, consultation are some of the key points that QRA look at when they're looking at particular projects that might be eligible for betterment projects. So probably just identify the difference between what betterment and what our REPA is. So under REPA, restoration of essential public assets, we might have, for example, a floodway that's had some damage to the existing structure. Under REPA, we would typically be eligible to replace that to essentially a like for like, so it's reconstructing it to its former standard. Under the betterment, for example, we might find that all of the approaches each side of the floodway have scoured out, and that it would make sense, whilst we're reconstructing the floodway, to extend the concrete floodway for another 10 metres up the bank, for example. That's not eligible under REPA, but it is eligible under what's known as our betterment, and we would apply under this scheme to undertake the additional work, preferably in conjunction with the reconstruction of the floodway under REPA. And so in the report, I've provided the current list of projects that we have under consideration for betterment, and the list, it's very much a work in progress, but I thought we'll put it in there, at least gives councillors an idea of the types of projects that we're looking at considering under this betterment submission. And you can see that the majority of those projects very much relate to floodways, concrete floodways, earthen floodways that have scoured out, and fairly high likely chance in the future of them sustaining damage. So the betterment around those particular projects relates to either extending concrete up the approaches, or additional pipes, or batter protection, rock protection, etc. It is very much a work in progress, and there's a substantial amount of work that goes into each of these projects in terms of costing and working out what the betterment project will look like.
Thank you for that comprehensive report, Manager. It is recommended that Council note this report for information. Do we have a mover? Councillor Jones, seconded. Councillor Potter. Speakers, Councillor Henson. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, just a question to Manager Searle and clarification with this betterment program. Is that funding directed at the entire project, or just what, like for argument's sake, you suggested on a causeway where it scours out the end and we might continue that concrete for another 5 or 10 metres? Is that betterment funding just that, or that entire project?
Just the improvements to it. So in that particular example, it is the additional approaches, and so the other portion, say for example the floodway's been washed away or scoured or damaged, the repairs to that is under the what we call the REPA, the restoration of essential public assets.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. That was all I wanted, just clarification on that, because when we look at some of these photos, what we have in front of us, that, you know, would certainly suck up that betterment funding, that's for sure. Whereas if it can, and we've said this and made comment about this before, where we can see in certain circumstances, if we went and did something just 10 or 50 metres up the road, would aim at having a much better result in future damage on some of these crossings and things. So thank you.
Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I noticed on page 33 it says applicants will be required to prepare and lodge the betterment project within the corresponding REPA submission and attach a completed betterment project application form and supporting documents included. So we're already in, they're working on Gerrards and Manar Road, which was in the first submission. Have we submitted the betterment projects, which I've noticed that you've actually got on page 58 and 62? Have they been submitted as part of that REPA submission? And if not, are those projects going to be addressed when the contractors are already on the ground?
Thanks, Manager.
Yep, and that's perhaps the urgency in some of these projects. So no, we haven't submitted any betterment projects, but mindful that there are submissions that we're currently working on, such as Manar Road. So there is somewhat of an urgency to look at some of these betterment projects and decide how we're going to, whether we wish to proceed with some of these improvements. Bearing in mind there is also a time lag between us submitting the betterment proposed projects and then the approvals coming through, which adds to the urgency perhaps.
So, just Manager, in terms of the question there, so in that paragraph there, page 33, where it says that applicants are required to prepare and lodge the project within the corresponding REPA submission, does that mean that, so can we still lodge betterment projects even if the flood works have been approved on that particular section of road? Can we do have a second chop at a betterment after that's been approved and perhaps the works have been done?
That's correct. Under the guidelines, I believe we have essentially 9 months from the end of financial year of a particular flood event to lodge REPA submissions, and that would also be similar to the betterment submissions.
Okay. Councillor Duff, anything further?
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, is it our intention to lodge those on those particular roads? Because I do think that they are very, like it would be a shame to do that Manar Road and that Gerrards Road and not do those extra projects. So is that our intention?
Certainly there's an opportunity there, and it's probably seek council's direction. More than happy to progress with these. You see the photos there. There's quite significant damage on those, and if perhaps if we don't take advantage of the opportunities there, then eventually it's a cost to council.
And just on that, if I could, please, sorry, Manager, but if we've got Red Frost doing that assessment, you're saying, are we able to use their services to then do the betterment submission as well while we've got them here doing the assessments? Once we've identified where we'd like betterment work done, or to give us some advice or guidance around that?
They can certainly assist in that space. Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the comprehensive report and the detail. It's excellent to go over, and just incredible to see so much damage across the region catalogued in such a way. My question was, I guess I got a little overwhelmed when I started rolling through here and seeing the amount of work that's been identified for potential betterment, and I was wondering if we actually knew what the total estimate of the projects that are in this report actually is. I'm mindful that it says $150 million of the $360 million package for phase 3 flood recovery is available for betterment. So, and that potentially we need to co-contribute 10%, which could be either materials, labour, or I guess capital. I'm just wondering, in terms of our experience, what's the total estimate here? How many of these projects are we likely to get up, and how do we actually prioritise the projects that we put forward? Do we put them all forward and leave it to the government to determine which ones meet the criteria. I guess they're some of my questions, General Manager Searle.
Thanks, Manager.
Yep. So what I've presented is very much the draft, and there's I think you've pointed out that a majority of the tasks still to happen. So in terms of cost, no, we don't. We haven't looked at the cost at this stage. Certainly, we do need to do that. Because we've got so many perhaps smaller projects in here, part of this process would be discussing with our QRA contact to look at how we do prioritise, how we best submit these, and whether it is on a priority basis, but still submit the list, or we'll certainly take some advice from QRA to make to give council the best opportunity of getting as many projects as we can. In terms of the cost contribution to council, I have noted a 10% contribution, which isn't in the guidelines, but it seems to be an historical rule of thumb that is looked favourably by QRA in terms of their assessment, but it is you won't find that in the guidelines.
Yeah, thank you, General Manager Searle. I guess in your commentary, you've said, you're looking for council's direction in this regard, and I imagine we really can't give you a direction until we get that QRA advice and that further detail around what the actual co-contribution would be. And my supplementary question, I guess, is around time frame. Like, it's wonderful that you've got all this work done and the draft is progressing. What are your thoughts in terms of the discussions with the QRA around what project or advice they could give us in terms of how we take this forward, and then the time frame for us in terms of when council would need to, does council make a decision, or do you basically just need the authority through the CEO to push forward because this is time sensitive? I guess that's where I'm a little confused and would like your clarity.
Thank you, Manager.
On the basis that we're still actually going through the network, identifying defects and potential betterment projects, it may be beneficial for council to look at a one or two betterment submissions. So perhaps we, with the known information that we have now, to essentially get in as quick as we can to at least put something in there. And that's something that we can progress quite quickly, and perhaps that's a report back to next month as to how we're going, and whether council has any particular thoughts on the projects that we're looking at submitting, or unless council's happy for us to progress and get it in.
Thank you.
Yeah, certainly, I guess that's my thinking. It's around if there's only $150 million across the state, and from what I've read, these can be heavily subscribed. I think time really is of the essence. A significant amount of projects identified here that I think are all very worthy projects. There hasn't been one. I don't think any of us would go, oh, don't do that if you can. I guess I'm thinking about, the recommendation that's been put forward, and that there needs to be, does there need to be an action or a head of power, and probably looking at the CEO for some direction here as to how we give the team what they need to really move this forward, full support of council to push forward and get whatever you can to support these outcomes, because they're all very worthy projects. So that's probably my question to you, CEO Mark, in terms of how we proceed.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. CEO, I'll come to you shortly. Just be recommending perhaps council committee that we perhaps I'd probably recommend that we put forward. I'd put forward a foreshadowed motion, subject to the advice. I'd be looking to put forward a motion that we have the guidelines circulated once they're available to all councillors, with thereby providing councillors with an opportunity to provide feedback as to proposed betterment projects within their division within by a due date, such that a report could be brought back to the August Standing Committee meeting for consideration of priority projects to be submitted. But that would be subject to your thoughts and advice, Mr. CEO, in response to Councillor Shoemaker's point. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. So, process going forward, absolutely, and Mayor, that would be once we deal with, because it's just just a note for information. So certainly that one can be. The guidelines are available now. They've only actually, the program's only just recently, and just waiting for an opportunity. Got a letter just recently that the betterment program's been open, so this is very fresh. The other bit that stands council in good stead in this is, and it will, in my head, as to how we go forward, certainly take the advice, the discussions with the QRA is pivotal about what they can't tell us necessarily what to put in, but they give very nice big broad hints as to what works and what doesn't. But also council's got skin in the game with once the budget comes down on Friday, if the 2 million for the betterment program, for council's betterment program, they will view that very well. Where a council's willing to put its own skin in the game in this space, and so will the Commonwealth state governments through these processes. So yeah, so I use the role we was a little bit hesitant to preempt this report till budget on Friday and what the outcome of that is. So certainly, yeah, absolutely, we can circulate the guidelines to all councillors, get a report back. If there is as a priority, August Standing Committee, we may need just to move once it gets to the Standing Committee to start getting submissions in. It'll depend on timelines and also that discussion. We have nominally till it's 23 when the submissions are due. I just can't think of the month, but it's in 2023. But we don't want to be sending them in at that late stage. But also. So there's more work to come, and then there would be worth a discussion is if we are co-contributing, if there's a couple of priority projects is out of that, and understanding councils was at the discretion of the engineers, the previous, but I think that engagement with they had divisional councils, but if we have that engagement, if some of that money could be allocated as co-contributions to the priority betterment projects, that report would come back and then we can tick it off and get them in. And Red Frost is absolutely a partner in this with us. They've got extensive experience. And if I may, the very first, and I probably may have told you before, the very, very first betterment project was out of the 2011 floods, the gained water intake got washed away. And we met with both Labor ministers and coalition ministers at the time and argued tooth and nail not to put it back where it was, because whilst it hadn't washed away for the previous 50 years, it was always at risk. We were forced under REPA to put the gained water intake back absolutely where it was as it was, actually, and it had been commissioned for 2 weeks, and the 2013 flood came along and took the whole lot, so it was literally millions wasted. And that was the very first betterment, Minister Christopher Foley, who was a local government minister, and Joel Fitzgibbons, who's recently retired. It was bipartisan, and it was through those two gentlemen, through their ministerial portfolios, that brought the betterment program about, and the gain to water intake was the classic example. If you build it back where it is, as it is, under the system, you're just throwing money away, and we have those opportunities. It's way better to improve the asset.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. CEO. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, my concern is that we're going to be too late for some of the roads that we're already working on, as Councillor Duff has mentioned. So that would be my concern. So is there a way that we can do that? And if we do, how's that funded? Can we claim it back? I would just like to know what can be done about the roads that we're already on now.
Yeah, thanks, Manager Searle. If we were to consider this at the August Infrastructure Standing Committee meeting and then give you some guidance as to which the priority projects to proceed with applications for betterment, is that going to be, in your opinion, is that going to be leaving things a little bit too late, or? Thank you.
I think that'll be fine, Mr. Mayor. So if there are, we'll have a look at some of these roads that we're currently working on, and just have a look at the impact, and if there will be any detrimental actions that we're currently doing that may disadvantage us with our betterment, there may be an opportunity. If there is, that we delay some of those specific works, particularly causeways, floodways, etc. But August is fine.
Thank you, Manager. You comfortable with that, Councillor Potter? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Schumacher?
Just one further question, just in line of the conversation that we're having. We've done a lot of work on that priority analysis, identifying the road hierarchy, its uses, why one road should be prioritised over another. And I guess I'm thinking about that tool, that prioritisation tool, and this project. My concern would be if councillors provide feedback. Certainly, you can provide feedback from the people who live on the road, who have an interest in the road, their views on traversing it, how it works, which is valuable. I'm not dismissing that or disrespecting that, but I'm thinking about how do we get best value for the dollars that we're investing and the dollars that the government are investing, and how do we ensure that the projects that we do select are actually priority projects. Certainly I could go around and pick a number of projects that I think are priority, but when we run them through that project analysis, my judgment or views could be very different to that of the data and the facts around a road. So I guess my question to you, Manager Searle, is through this process or through the past or certainly into the future, how do you see us actually using some of those tools that we have to help us determine which projects, if we can't, there's quite a long list there, if we can't submit them all, which projects we do actually submit? Would we be putting this draft report through that project priority analysis tool to sort of determine how, they rank, and then determine where the spend would be best spent?
Thank you, Manager. So, Manager, yeah, once you had the long list, be it from what you've got here, possibly complemented by what council has provided you with on behalf of the community, I guess the question is, what would be your process to be able to narrow that down to a short list or a recommended list of priorities to form part of a submission in advance of that August meeting?
Yep. I think it's when we talk about the prioritisation model that we've got, it's when we look at the betterment context, it's perhaps a little bit different. And when you look at, say, QRA, they'll be looking at the cost benefit on these projects. So these projects have to have had previous damage. So if you can clearly show that this particular asset's been damaged time and time again over the last 4 events, then that holds the project in good stead. If you can show that the betterment cost might be $100,000 to do betterment works, if you can show that benefit is offset by the damage that we would typically see in a flood event, it may be $200,000. If we have to repair that particular asset, then that probably ranks higher when you look at the cost forgone, the cost that you no longer have to spend each year or each flood event. And I think that's perhaps more the prioritisation in this particular example, rather than say the straight priority project tool that we've been using for our other assets.
Yeah, thank you, Manager. And I guess as you've demonstrated at the bottom of page 33, there's actually criteria, the guidelines that they would expect us to address. So I imagine that your recommendation back to us would be based on those projects that best fit the criteria set down under the betterment guidelines. Would that be the process that you'd use? You'd do that assessment yourselves against those criteria?
I think so, Mr. Mayor. It's essentially giving these projects the best chance. We would put forward the projects that have the best chance of getting the funding. So matching the criteria that the QRA have would make sense.
Thank you, Manager. Councillor Erkins.
Can I just have some clarification on the betterment? So what it actually means is we would be fixing a problem, say a culvert, yeah, thanks, and the betterment, so we actually pay for that, whether it be through flood damage or whatever, and then the betterment is the leading up to and paying to stop that washing out. That's what we're not actually talking about fixing the issue. We're talking about to stop it happening again, to improve that.
Thanks, Manager.
Thanks.
If there's damage on all of these photos, we've seen that there's damage, and a lot of that damage would be funded under the flood recovery, but reconstructing it to a higher level. So if we decided that particular floodway only has a small pipe and we think it needs a much larger pipe, then that would come under the betterment.
So some of these damages we would go ahead and do anyway. We don't have to wait for the betterment. We could then do the betterment if we got the funding for them. So you could, like, there are some sections where you would just repair the culvert, and then if you got the funding to make the entry onto it and the driveway off, so we're not going to be holding up any of these things that need doing while we're waiting for that anyway, are we?
Potentially that's correct. It's just ensuring that if there's similar work to be done on a floodway, for example, concrete replacement, that it makes sense to continue that same task up the hill, so to speak. And if there's sections like that, then that are very, I suppose, attached to the reaper work that we're doing, then there would be a desire to hold that works until we look at the betterment outcome. But certainly there would be examples where they would be separate, so that it wouldn't delay any of the reaper work.
Thanks, Manager. Councillor Duff.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm concerned about the timelines and as Manager Kevin said before about the urgency with some of these roads that we're already on. And there's already a current potential betterment list here and all these photos and the work the council staff have obviously done or Red Frost have done with all of these roads here that are just in a real mess and they're potential betterment projects. I can't see why we would hold it up and wait until all the divisional councils put submissions forward and then we went to an August meeting. What I believe we should do is endorse these to be put forward as betterment projects today, now, so that in July, at this month, we can put it through our regular council meeting to go ahead with it. I'm just concerned about the timelines and why would we delay when they've already done all this work?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. We might just get this recommendation, as Mr CEO said, through, and then we can come back to considering where do we go from here. So is there anything further, just in terms of accepting this report at this stage? We go to the vote on that? Yeah, so the motion is here that council note this report for information. So those in favour? Carried unanimously, thank you all. So we've got that done. In terms of where we go now and your comments, Councillor Duff, I put up one option. Councillor Duff, you're suggesting another. Does anyone have a motion they'd like to move in relation to progressing? Councillor
Thank you,
Duff,
Mr
go
Mayor.
ahead. Thank
I'd
you.
like to move that this list of betterment projects that the staff have put together be put forward in a submission to REPA as advised by Manager Searle as to the timelines and the guidelines. I guess just that the list of betterment projects be put forward that are in the current potential betterment list.
Mr. CEO, please correct me. We probably need to go, that the committee recommend, yeah.
Yeah.
We would. Thank you, Mr. CEO. Thanks, Bree.
Be put forward to, is it to REPA or to QRA? These betterment projects be put forward to.
We might just get Mr. CEO to help help word your intention. Thank you, Mr. CEO. Councillor Potter, do you mind? We're just Mr. CEO.
Oh, no, that's all right. I thought it was the operator. Don't worry. The list of betterment projects be put forward the list of projects be put forward for betterment funding, and we can tidy it up for the actual ordinary meeting, if that's all right, Councillor.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder? We'll get a seconder first. So we have a seconder, Councillor Erkins, and then we'll come back to you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Duff, did you want to speak to your motion? Then we'll go to Councillor Potter.
I just think that, as Deputy Mayor Jones has often said, that we need to put some faith in our staff, and they've gone to a lot of trouble. They've said what flood events these are in. There's a whole list of work being done, and I just think that they're in a better position to understand the whole guidelines and process than we are as divisional councillors going out and cherry picking our thoughts around, what. I just don't think that we should undermine the staff's work, and that we should progress this now. And as Manager Searle said, it's urgent because some of these roads we're already working on. Well, I just wanted to put it in their hands to progress it sooner rather than later. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Councillor. I just would like to clarify, I don't think we're looking to undermine the staff's work. I think, if anything, we were looking to take their advice on this. And I'll go to Councillor Potter, then I'm keen to hear from Manager Searle, because there's a big list of projects here, and I think we'll be looking for some advice on what is likely to get up. Should we put all the projects in? Are they all going to be strong cases under the criteria? So keen to get some technical advice there, Manager, but Councillor Potter first. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think it's a great motion, but my concern is there's probably more. As we heard earlier, there's 950 roads that we're sort of working on at the moment, and we're still going through, I believe, and finding different roads that we need to add to this. So I suppose I've got a couple of questions here. Can we add or put another, if we put this one in now, are we able to at a later date to add more in? Because that's my concern. If we just put this lot in, are we losing out on other ones that we may have missed out on because we're trying to sort of get this one in early?
So, yeah, there's a bit in all that, isn't there? Manager, if you could perhaps help answer Councillor Potter's question, do we get another chance if you identify the roads?
Do. Yes.
So we do. Okay, thank you. So then coming back to my concern here, and that is, I haven't counted this, but there's a long, thanks very much. This is a very comprehensive report, and you've put in, you and your staff have done a lot of work, clearly mountains of work in coming up with these options here. To put all of these forward, what are you thinking in terms of that? Should we narrow this down to projects that you think are more likely to get up? What's the best approach?
Yep. So that list is what we currently have as potential projects. I would, as part of this, I would be seeking advice from our QRA liaison officer, just to provide some guidance on what would give council the best opportunity. If that advice is they're all legitimate projects, they're all worthy, and if there's an opportunity to submit them all, then we should. as I say, that it's a draft list that we have, and there's still a lot of work to go through and cost those and properly get those into a fashion that they can be submitted. But and again, there's still that prioritisation tasks to be done on all of those projects. So it may be that we find that some of those projects may just drop off on the basis that they're not good candidates. Certainly, if they are all good candidates, then I would suggest we do put them forward.
Thank you, Manager. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I do. It's been mentioned, and you just mentioned it. This, in my 6 years of being in council, is probably some of the best information that I've been presented as far as issues and roads and all that sort of stuff going forward. So whoever's been a part of this, congratulations. That is fantastic, and I can use that, and every one of us as councillors can take that out and talk to the community and use that as information. You've given us all the information, all the proposed upgrades, all that sort of stuff. Fantastic report. I think the big player in this conversation is the $2 million that we're proposing to put into the budget for the betterment project. And it's been mentioned here that 10% is not a recommendation, but it's looked on very favourably. So I think until Friday, and that's endorsed as part of our budget for 22-23, that has a big bearing on what we do and how we move forward in this, because that $2 million can be used on projects that we can be addressed. I guess that $2 million, if it's put in there and it's passed in the budget on Friday, or endorsed at least, if we were to take 500 out of that, that'll obviously raise it down to 1 point, or reduce it to 1.5. So that would only be co-funding 15 million. So I guess, yeah, for me, moving forward, I think I'd like to see what happens on Friday with the proposal of the $2 million for betterment works in our budget. And that will guarantee how we move forward on this, I believe. And I don't disagree with anything that's been said in the chamber this morning. Putting this program together, I think it can only be, again, I go back, the $2 million is a big player in this conversation. We put that in. It's certainly going to help us with QRA and all that sort of stuff with this betterment funding projects and all that sort of stuff. But we have that in the budget to at least start conversations and looking at projects on Manar Road, for an example. Might be able to spend $150,000 on that crossing and reduce that or whatever. But to me, I just think as we sit, I'd like to see what happens on Friday. If that $2 million is endorsed, and I'd certainly like to see all these projects, as Kev's just indicated. They're all eligible and fantastic report. But again, it does have a big bearing on how we attack our betterment project, that $2 million that's proposed on Friday for our budget for betterment work. So I'd like to just see what happens on Friday, and if we can make a motion, Mr CEO, I'm happy to talk to you in regards to these projects, the betterment projects that we've got in front of us, whether we can agree to certainly lodge them. But I think that Friday conversation on the budget discussions with that $2 million for betterment has a really big impact on how we as a council move forward on this project.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. It is a good point, isn't it? Mr CEO, would it be possible for we've said here recommends to council, would it be possible for council to consider this as an item at the end of the agenda on Friday's budget meeting? I mean, we're not expecting the complete list, but to consider giving the staff the go-ahead to go ahead and put together an application, or should that go back to an ordinary meeting?
It's a special meeting, can only generally adjust the items that are presented to it. So, it's not that I'm not wanting to do it. If after the budget meeting, if councillors wanted to go through the list as a workshop, and that would certainly inform the July meeting. Happy to work with you, but yeah, we've got the other it's a committee meeting though. The other aspect will be finalising the exec and finance and livability community standing committees on Friday afternoon agenda. So we got those as well. So, but yeah, happy to have the conversation with you how we progress it. But it would be the ordinary, unless even notice of meeting would be a bit light on now. Yeah.
Yeah, we'd be running out of time, wouldn't we, for notice of meeting? Come back to you, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, just quickly, Mr Mayor, I'm happy with Councillor Duff's motion there. recommendation that the list of projects be put forward for betterment funding, I guess, we can move forward. I'm happy to go there. But again, with maintaining that conversation after the budget discussions on Friday, if the $2 million proposed betterment projects money is successful and goes forward, I'm sure then we can have a discussion in July moving forward on exactly how we approach it and put all the projects. At least we've got them already lodged. And I guess in that lodgement, would you need to mention that you do have $2 million of funding from council, Kev? How does that work? Or does that have any bearing on, if you were to lodge these before the endorsed $2 million proposed, will that affect how you apply for your betterment funding through the QRA?
Thanks, Manager. Well, Mr. CEO, did you want to add anything to that? Or just, yeah.
Yes, Mayor, I'm just thinking and conscious of time as well, and I'm probably being a party pooper. But some of those questions is when we bring the report back, we can probably address a number of these points in the report going forward. Happy, the guidelines, I've brought them up on the website where can circulate them still, Mayor, happily without a resolution. So we'll get them out as a matter of urgency for people to have a read and think. And yeah, and if you're comfortable in passing this, well, as a group, well then we'll get in and action it as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. So are we generally comfortable that this list be brought, that this comes back to the ordinary meeting at the end of July, Councillor Duff, because that would be the process? Yeah. Okay, so any further speakers on that basis? Councillor Duff, anything to wrap up? We'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. So I'll now move that we adjourn for morning tea. Thanks, Councillor Hanshin. Those in favour? Councillor Duff? Yep, I've got everybody. Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Hey, welcome back, everyone. I'll now move that we resume the meeting. We have a second, and thanks, Councillor Hanshin. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. So, Council, just before we move on to item committee, before we move on to item 6.4, I would just like to apologise to the committee for some statements I made this morning that were incorrect. So, in relation to the length of the road in front of the kindergarten in Kingaroy, General Manager Lowe's actually revisited that. It's actually 160 metres approximately, and the cost to curb and channel that would be approximately 100,000, not the 50,000 that I indicated, not the 70 metres and the 50,000. So Councillor Jones actually, his point was actually correct, and Councillor Potter raised a very good point in terms of covering those access to those residential properties. So General Manager Lowe is going to bring back a report to the meeting at the end of the month with accurate costings, so that the council can then make a decision on whether or not you do want to proceed with that. So, Councillor Jones, my sincere apologies to you and to Councillor Potter and to the staff and to the committee for that. Okay, so now then, 6.4, updated information on unmaintained roads. That's at page 71, and we might get you to lead us through that. Thanks very much, Manager Searle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this report is a continuation of a previous report at one of our Infrastructure Standing Committee meetings, where we talked about roads that are currently unmaintained, and in particular unmaintained roads that have had requests from the community to commence maintaining them. So there were two bits of information in this report. One was an indicative costing of what it may cost per kilometre. I haven't looked at individual costs of the requests that we have, given the nature, the variable nature of road reserves in terms of drainage and topography and et cetera. But as an indicative cost, we're looking at in the order of $40,000 per kilometre to go from an unmaintained road to something that's maintained, has a formation and some drainage, etc. The second bit of information is the attached table, and we did present this at a previous Infrastructure Standing Committee meeting, and it's an updated list of that road of those requests. And if councillors find any omissions, please let me know. But it's certainly a little bit longer than the previous version. So these ones are known requests that we have for maintaining a previously unmaintained road. And at the bottom of the attachment there's also a handful of roads, they're called 5D roads, that we haven't had any requests from the customers, but they're on our register as 5D roads, so they're not maintained, but we're aware that there is some sort of use. They may be a private access to a property, but are located on a road reserve. So that's essentially the bulk of the report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Manager. Councillor Duff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to flag that Millards Road and Whelan Street are still on that list, but we actually passed a motion or resolution of council that those roads be included in the formed road list. So just wanting to flag that they should be taken off that list. And I also wanted to know what was happening with the Kingaroy service road that was also a resolution of council. When is it going to be gravelled, graded and upgraded?
Thank you, Manager.
I would need to take that on notice, Councillor, in terms of timing that we have for the service road on Kingaroy Road. I'll provide some additional information at perhaps the next Infrastructure Standing Committee meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Manager. If you could take that on notice, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Councillor Erkins?
Through you.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor. There's a guy with a house in Nanango. I'm not sure whether that would be the Home Street one, but he actually comes from Home Street and then there's another street goes up which is unmade, and he has apparently approached a few times, so I'm not sure whether that would be, it's Appin Street East or something like that.
Thanks,
I was
Manager.
just going to see if I could find it on the map.
Yep, I would happy to take that one on notice. We do have Home Street listed, approximately 230 metres, and that was a request for grading the entire length. So I wonder if that's the one.
Oh, Councillor, sorry. We just need to stand, put your light on. Thank you.
It actually comes, so when you go up Good Street, you turn right into Home Street, and then there's that house on the corner, and then this house that I'm talking about is actually behind. So there's actually an unmade road that goes up there, and they gain access from that. Well, with the rain and everything, of course, it's all really, I'll find the street and I'll send the street to you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, happy to, if that's not on the list, then happy to look at that one on the list.
Thank you, Manager. We might just get this motion up first, move forward, then we can come back to Councillor Jones. So it's recommended at this stage that Council note the information in this report. Do we have a mover? Councillor Jones, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Potter. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I will raise it again. We've got 37 kilometres of road there that have been identified in customer requests over a period of time, and it looks like they go back to as early as 2016, 2014 there. So they've been around for a while. You're talking over 1.2, 1.4 million just in there, and I can assure you that I can add a number of them. I've had conversations in the past where I have actually said to the people, no, they're not on our register. I've had conversations, but I haven't lodged customer requests, but I found out information. So there is a lot there. So here we are. It tells you here in the report that the financial cost, potential increase in cost to council with an increase in level of service to the road network, plus depreciation and everything else that goes with it. Now, we know how hard this budget is that we've been working on, and we're continuing to add stuff to the staff in regards to trying to extend our maintenance programs and everything else. So, again, Whelan Street, all that sort of stuff, I don't, look, it's just difficult. I'm All I'm saying is the fact that we need to be very careful. We go into budget discussions, we cut money, hell, west and crooked, and then on the back end of it, we turn around and say, oh yeah, we've got to start somewhere. Where do we stop? Once you start, you have to continue. And we know how hard the budgets are, and we have conversations in this chamber about how hard the future's going to be and how are we going to cover the costs of all this sort of stuff adding to this? These roads have been on an unmaintained register for a reason. And if we want to bring them off, we have to be aware that this is going to be substantial costs to our future budgets and the ratepayer and whatever else. Now, if we start relying on grant funding and all that sort of stuff to be sustainable, I believe that we're going the wrong way. So I just want to make that again, highlight the fact that we're talking over 1.2, 1.4 million just there. And then we've got ongoing costs. And then we put onto our depreciation register and everything else. So significant costs to our council and ratepayers, this process here.
Thank you, councillor. Further speakers? Councillor Duff? Sorry, who was next? Councillor Erkins.
Okay,
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr Mayor. I take on board what Councillor Jones says, but some people have not, the particular guy that I was talking to, he was not aware that it wasn't a road that was being maintained. They bought the place, they haven't been there that long. It was really only, I think, when it rained and he went to see why his road wasn't being maintained. So I think there are a lot of people who bought in good faith and weren't actually notified of the situation. And, you know, as I said, I can see both points, but that's the reality of it.
Councillor Duff. Councillor Duff,
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm keen to, through you, Mr Mayor, I'm keen to have a look at these roads. I think that a lot of this stuff is just historical. It's just where you landed after amalgamation, whether your road was included in formed or unformed. I know after amalgamation there were some roads that I was actually able to give evidence that it was a formed road and it was graded, and that was enough to get it in the list. Some of this stuff has not been done in a methodical, proper process. We have an agricultural region. We rely heavily on agriculture. A lot of these are to get people to their farm gates and to their properties. They can't understand why they have not been maintained. I think that as a council, we owe it to these people to clarify where we stand with these roads, and even if we have to do it road by road. But I don't think it's fair to just take historical data and just go, you're in and you're out. So I'm very keen to progress this, to look at it and to give feedback to the particular customers to reasons why their particular road was left out, or so that it's clear into the future that piece does not get done, and this is the reason why. Thank you.
Councillor Schumacher.
Yes, thank you for the report and the update. You know, the last report we had, I think it was 18 kilometres of road that had been recognised. So it's great to see the work's been done to actually review the customer requests and the previous history in relation to unmaintained roads, which has taken us to 37.01 kilometres, which I've done the maths. And yes, Councillor Jones, you are right. There's $1.48 million if we were to bring all of these roads up to standard tomorrow. That's certainly not my intent of the conversation. My thinking is that there are landholders and property owners on these properties that have a right to a safe access to their property, just like everybody else in the region. And I completely understand and appreciate this is a historic challenge. I completely understand and appreciate it's one that comes at a cost. I am not suggesting we go and review and tomorrow do all 37 kilometres. But I do think as a council we actually have to workshop and discuss and understand some of these things, because my thinking is this is no different to the unsealed dust register. The reality is there are a number of roads with a number of good reasons why they should be sealed in our region on that dust seal register. And the reality is we can't afford to do all of those roads tomorrow, even despite very good reason. And every year for as long as I could go back, which was about 2017, council had been sealing sections of road. And this year, we've taken a different approach. And I guess my thinking made a different decision. And my thinking is, with some of these long-standing problems, is that we have to, A, understand them. This is a great way in terms of understanding the issue at hand. And B, our role as councillors is to determine a strategy for how we address them into the future. If the mood of council is that we're going to tell everybody on an unformed road, an unmaintained road, that their road will never be maintained, and these are the things that you will have to do to live with that, I'm okay with that, as long as that's the same consistent message for everybody, and we don't make decisions in 12 months' time which, negate that policy. So I guess I'm looking at council, I'm thinking about the sealing register for dust, and I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking we actually need to develop a policy so we can be very honest and clear with our ratepayers as to what we will and won't do, what we can and can't afford, and the reasons why underpinning that. That's my thinking in relation to this. I think it's a great report. It's a great start. Thank you very much for continuing the conversation. I think it's something we can't lose sight of, and I think we've actually got quite a lot of work to do in reviewing through our service catalogue this year, the different services that we offer as a council, the cost of those, and how we'll continue to offer those into the future. I think that's a core priority of the operational plan, and it all fits together. If we think strategically and look at the bigger picture, all of these things actually need to be discussed, and we do need a policy position on them.
Thank you, councillor. Yeah, I can see Technical Officer Cody, I think, sitting down the back. Yeah, there you are. Hello, Cody. We've put a lot of work into our prioritisation tool, and I think as Councillor Shoemaker's saying, we need a policy that informs a strategy as to how we're going to, as to what our position will be into the future in relation to sealing of unsealed roads, in relation to forming of unformed roads, and this might be a body of work that we would perhaps bring into that trialling of the maybe part of that policy or strategy would be to actually look to develop a process that does include that prioritisation tool or some form of that can then inform council if we do decide to embark on a process as to what the priorities would actually be should we go down that path. So I think we have started some good work in terms of setting some templates and processes in place. It's a matter of what's the appetite of council in terms of do we progress? If we are intending to progress, what will be our policy and strategy be? Mr. CEO, just in light of Councillor Shoemaker's comments there, your thoughts in terms of, over the next 12 months, a process to consider those two issues, the sealing and the registering of unmaintained roads, or changing of that policy and strategy around that? From your experience, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a good question, Mayor. Certainly an overarching plan as to how to go ahead, because I'll call it the old position, but whether probably poor English, but has been, if they're not on the register, they don't get done. And that's been the line that's been held when the inquiries have come in. If that's to change, it probably is. I know we've spoken about a lot, but certainly as we move forward in this half of the year, the discussions that get involved in grants and capital projects is kicking them off a bit earlier. So whether it's within this first quarter or second quarter of this financial year that we actually put our heads together and probably August, September, and have a session on capital projects and these are upgrades, and so is our policy renewal? Is it replacement? Is it upgrade? Is it new? And get some of those bigger picture concepts in place, and then we can bring them back into a framework.
In terms of a process, Councillor Shoemaker, CEO's response, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm thinking in terms of that service level catalogue. That's really important, because you know, we really do need to understand, yeah, Councillor Jones is absolutely right. Going through the budget every year is perhaps the most gut-wrenching, difficult thing I've ever done in my career, ever. And the more you think you've solved one problem, you've created another, which is the really difficult thing around trying to balance our very difficult budget. My thinking is that we need to take all of this information that we've been collecting and we need to review, we need to workshop and discuss and review our service levels across our sealed and unsealed network. We know we've got significant maintenance backlog. We know we've got the issues of 4 floods this year. All of this information, the information we know now, we've got 37 kilometres of unmaintained roads, and people who have been contacting us since 2014 asking, you know, council to consider maintaining their road because they're having challenges accessing it. We now know that. There's a report for that. I guess I'm asking, can we take all of this information that we've got and review our current operations and see where the gaps are, or what opportunities there are to do things differently into the future, if we need to do them differently. I'm talking about a broad level review and a broad level discussion about how we currently do road infrastructure in our region. Will the practices of the past set us up for the future? And what is our policy position? I think that work will inform what our policy position is. I know the previous council had done a lot of work around determining, you know, we'll prioritise rural roads, we'll run a grader over rural roads. Every year you'll get a grade. It meant sweating the bitumen seal network. I guess my worry is now we're seeing fatigue on the bitumen seal network. So, and if we reduce the level of service on the rural roads, that will be felt in the rural community. So all in all, I know I'm rambling, but this is quite complex. We've got a number of different operational and capital factors here. And we've got a number of different community expectations. You know, we've received, in my time at council, my very short time at council, a number of petitions for a number of projects, and everybody's given due time to put their case forward. But I guess my thinking is, you know, we need to be a bit united in the way we go forth with some of these issues. We need to ensure best value, and we need to really understand as a council what our position is on them. If we're going to continue to have unsealed roads and unmaintained roads, and we're not going to change that philosophy, then we need to contact all of these people and let them know that's our position. So I think we need more. I think there's a lot of factors here and a lot of information that's come forward with the budget, and a lot of information that's come forward certainly through our committee meetings. And I actually think we need to do some workshops and really think about the services, the service level, what it's costing us, and the implications of adding or removing certain parts, components of that. So I do think it fits into the service level conversation, but I do think there's some really wonderful information that we're collecting that we really do need to review our bigger picture strategy here.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. CEO, yeah, your response in terms of embarking on a process as a council where we can start to workshop all of these complex issues around roads that are very much integrated in terms of next financial year's body of work. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I'm having a bad day. I'll be short. Yeah, short answer, yeah. We've got the service level review that's in the operational plan, so we can tie it in. I suppose I'll just simplify it down for my mind into August as we come back into, we'll have not quite so many meetings, and so we might be able to, a couple of, I suppose I had my head partly in the capital space with the discussions and those priority list of projects that they take up a fair amount of time, is starting a workshop process, not to decide, but start getting some raw lists together, and particularly with grant funding programs, so that we can bring reports back and have that prioritisation so they can just roll a little bit more seamlessly and we don't take up as much of I don't want that to sound as a negative, but don't take up as much as a meeting time, is that we can bring that raw data, council can decide on, okay, these ones go in and we go from there. So, Mayor, if you're comfortable as part of the operational plan, the service level agreements, we'll schedule a workshop for October. Not October, August.
Yeah, and just some policy and strategy development around our roads, I suppose, road service levels, road capital programs, decision-making frameworks, that very broad, I suppose, policy, strategic policy setting by council that's going to inform future decisions. If we can start to workshop that, as Councillor Shoemaker's articulated, that'd be great. Thank you. Councillor Henson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through, yeah, just as Councillor Jones has said and Councillor Shoemaker has touched on it as well, there has been some great work done on these roads and they're interesting to read, and there's several there that will be fact that people don't want those roads maintained because they create a thoroughfare through their properties, which is exactly what they don't want. There's 37 kilometres of roads, and when we total those up, I'll make mention, and I have done before, to Manager Searle, Battingwaite's Road, Sarum Road, Orcox Road, Trentham Lane would total 37 kilometres, just in those four, that if they were to go on this list for maintaining the roads, and they're not maintained at the moment. That's just 4 roads. That would total 37 kilometres. It's a scary process that when we go there through this, and that's perfectly fine, and I agree wholeheartedly with your suggestion, Councillor Shoemaker, but be aware that there's 4 roads that I can total 37 kilometres. So that's just a little bit of food for thought. So there's no doubt great work being done, but there's a lot of work probably to progress this, that's for sure.
Councillor Erkins.
Yeah, I definitely agree with a workshop. I've had numerous people coming to me just thinking about it now who have got roads that they have been maintained in the past, but now they're finding they're not being maintained. So definitely like a workshop on it.
Yeah, and if I could just explain, put that in context from the discussion we've had, when we talk about workshops, we're talking about starting off with formulating policy and strategy and broad expectations that link into service levels. It's not about sitting down and saying, well, we'll do that road, we won't do that road. It's about setting that framework in place within which we can then make future decisions and communicate those policies of council to the community. So it's very much that broad strategic planning piece.
I
Councillor Erkins.
understand that, but we've got a road in Nanango that it's on the main road. There has been a service road goes up the side of it. It was always maintained before. Just recently, council were actually using it to park their vehicles on it, and one of the residents on that road rang me up because they had been complaining to council for some time that, you know, been ages since anything had been done. They felt it added insult to injury that the council vehicles were parked on that road. As it turned out, I think I actually spoke to Tim here at a meeting, and I think because they were there using the road, they could be said that they were damaging the road.
Yeah, I guess all those cases and perspectives and examples can be shared and can be used to inform what is going to be our policy position, what is going to be our criteria around this into the future, so we can be making consistent decisions based on well-founded frameworks that set down criteria and processes.
I understand that, and I understand not bringing individual cases. However, when this is on a main highway, so main roads won't let them come off the main highway unless there is an access road. When they were subdivided, I'm sure that access road was possibly a part of the subdivision. So somebody had to be responsible for it. And now it just turns out nobody is. So, I'm sure there's other cases like that.
Thank you, Councillor. Further councillors? Further speakers? No? Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to also flag, I've just noticed that the Kingarokuya Road is still on that list. So I just wanted to put in that that the information in the report be accepted, but it's subject to those 3 roads taken off that list of unmaintained roads.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Manager. I think you've noted that, Manager. Thank you. Councillor, for the councillors, for the speakers.
Mayor,
Mr.
the other
CEO?
part, we picked that up as a question on notice before, so we'll tidy it up. I've got a note, councillor, so that'll come back, yep, as a question on notice.
Thanks, Mr. CEO. Councillor Jones?
Yeah, I guess just as a closing right of reply, Mr Mayor, my whole point of the conversation was the fact that I wanted to highlight that the process here, and I don't disagree with anything that's been said. Everything's legit, it's all justifiable, all that sort of stuff. This discussion has impacts right across the region. As we've just discussed, this 37 kilometre figure can be doubled and tripled quite easily. Huge impacts. My disappointment is the fact that we picked three roads, before this report was brought back, and they were, if this has been used in this chamber a lot, hand-picked, cherry-picked, whatever you want. I would have liked to have seen those three roads brought back with this particular report, and that's why I voted against Whelan Street and Millards Road back when we put it through and it was endorsed. I didn't believe that it should have been done. When you put those three roads that we've just discussed into this list, there is possibly a number of roads that hit the priority mark way above them. So that's my disappointment in the process so far. And we certainly do need to improve. And all I'm saying is, as we currently sit, and being the roads portfolio holder, we are struggling to maintain properties and roads that we would call cattle truck roads, and they're on our register, and we're not, again, my personal view, we're not maintaining them to a level of satisfactory standards at the moment because there's people up at the foot of the bunions that are struggling to get in and get their weaners out and all that sort of stuff. It's happening right across our region because of the weather. So I'm a big believer that if we can't maintain what we've got to be very, very cautious in putting extra onto our list. Because if we can't look after what we've already got, how are we going to add to it and be sustainable and make sure that we're looking after what we've got and plus adding, plus the extra costs and all that? So that's the point of my conversation. Don't disagree that this, I'm not saying, I hope it was not interpreted that way, whereas, bang, finished, done, dusted. That's not what I mean. But this conversation is very complex and it does need to be considered because it has serious impacts onto the ratepayers of this region. Because if we continue going and adding and adding and adding, it's going to have an effect somewhere down the track. So we need to be very cautious. And again, I'm very disappointed in the fact, and that's my justification and why I voted against Whelan Street and Millards Road, and I still strongly disagree with it. This report those roads should not have been endorsed until this report and further discussions were had. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carry unanimously. Thank you all. And taking on board those outcomes, Mr. CEO, from that discussion. Sorry. So we'll now move on to, stage 2, Wondai Industrial Estate, item 6.5 at page 75. Thank you through you, General Manager. Manager Searle, thank you. Oh, sorry, I've got to lift it. Yes, sorry, my apologies. Thank you, Mr. CEO. So we do have, this matter has been laid on the table. So procedural motion, that the matter be lifted from the table. Do we have a mover? Councillor Duff, secondly, Councillor Potter. Okay, those in favour? Carry unanimously? Yep. Okay, all in favour? So the matter's now been lifted from the table. Mr. CEO, so that would bring over to you in terms of the process now.
Thanks, Mayor. So this is where, when they come back, so the only change would be we kept it as it was at the ordinary meeting, but pick up the debate with the moved and seconded resolution. It would end up as a committee recommend to council from this forum unless it's left lay again after the discussion to the ordinary meeting, and then it can be dealt with as its head of power. But yeah, certainly it's up for discussion, and when you resume the debate on the actual topic itself, it's been moved and seconded, and that's the live motion.
So we do have that live motion there, Mr. CEO, which is the one that is at the top of the page, yeah? Moved by Councillor Duff, seconded by Councillor Erkin. So that's the motion that is now live for debate. Councillor Duff.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Mr Mayor. Through you, Mr Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment that works budget with, where it goes, says works budget with an allocation of, to change it to 650,000 from council funds, with works to include two-way access on Kemp and Burrows Street, and improved signage across the industrial estate.
I want to confer with Mr CEO. Mr CEO, an amendment to that resolution, no issues from your perspective in terms of our process?
No, Mayor, it's the mover has moved to amend their own but yeah, no, short answer, no. So it'll just need to be, I would suggest, given that small change, it probably would be best to do it formally as an amendment. Yeah.
But formally as amendment then, Bree, yes. So that'll need to be a formal amendment. Councillor Duff, you're moving the amendment to the original motion. Do we have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Jones, thank you. Okay, so Councillor Duff, we'll now ask you to speak to your amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have had continuous complaints from various business owners in the industrial estate ever since we went did the stage one and made Kemp and Burrows Street one way. We met yesterday with 8 business owners employing up to 100 people when they all wrote down how many people they employed. Parkside are wanting to double the size of their operation within the next 5 years. The current design and layout is affecting their productivity. It's inefficient. They've actually got a forklift that they have to take almost 2 kilometres around the site because they can't take it back a couple of hundred metres the other way. It is having a major impact on a lot of the industry there. The trucks accessing the inspection station, that is the only inspection station for the whole of the South Burnett, and that's causing significant issues in the access to that particular inspection station. The group there, there was numerous concerns, safety issues. People are already, no one's taking notice. A lot of people are not taking notice of the current signage. They're worried about safety. People are just using the road as it used to be. Just general inefficiency, and as Elaine Raffin said, that particular industrial estate is the lifeblood of Wandai, and we need to get this right for those businesses. And talk about economic development. It's a major player in our region, that industrial estate and those businesses there. So I think that it's a huge issue for us, and that we need to have it in this budget. We need to do the work, to do the design and do the work in this budget, because I think for safety reasons and for to support our industries, that needs to happen. So really keen to have this supported. Thank you.
Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I think it's a great, it's a great works that needs to be done. My concern is that we seem to be dipping into council funds a lot. And this is another $650,000 that we're getting out of council funds. So I would just like to know that once we've done up this budget on Friday, how much we're actually dipping into council funds and how much we're going to have left, because I do believe that $2 million was coming out of council funds as well. So, and there's a few other things that we're pulling out of council funds. So I am concerned that we're not going to have the money in council funds to, if something drastic does come along that we need to do immediately, we're not going to have the funds to do it.
Councillor Henson.
Thank you. Mayor Otto, through you. Yes, it was a great meeting yesterday down there in Wandai, and as Mrs Raffin stated, it is the lifeblood of Wandai. There's one very, very simple fix there that does not going to cost a lot of money, and that is to change that one way. It is absolutely ludicrous to try and turn trucks into that establishment that does those roadworthies. So a simple signage and change there on, I think it's Kemp Street, to allow traffic two ways there. As the gentleman said yesterday, it's worked for 17 years. Pretty sure with some signage changes there. At the moment, it's one way for those that aren't aware. You cannot turn into that particular establishment off Burrows Street into that inspection station comfortably with any vehicle longer than probably 12 metres or 16, 18 metres, V-doubles or trailers or anything in there. To change that signage at the start of Kemp Street, and the Parkside gentleman yesterday was happy with the one-way street, and I'm just looking at my map for those down North Street. Parkside was happy with that being one-way. Remember, this industrial estate was designed in the early 80s where there wasn't V-doubles in the industrial estate. It is the lifeblood of Wandai. I just don't know where or how $650,000 has come from. Has there been any costings on that at all as in relation to stage 2? Because I honestly believe, and as you, Mr. Mayor, stated yesterday, that gravel on the edges of what's already been done is an absolute necessity there. There is some 200 mil drop-off on the work that's been done, great work that's been done down there. That really needs to be done, and I know wet weather's been a hindrance there, but by doing that, and I think with gravel and certain areas on intersections and the likes of that T road, to widen those T roads and intersections, I just don't believe $650,000 is a figure that we could settle on today, when I think there'd be some great work to be done down there. And the conversations we had yesterday, I think that signage is a very, very simple fix to allow traffic both ways. And as Mrs. Raffin stated, it's time. If you're driving a forklift, or if you've got your staff that's driving on a one-way street, it's taking them an extra 5 or 10 minutes to get in and out of their place. They charge their time, as it was explained yesterday. They charge their time to the customer, and their employees charge them their time as well, or contractors. So the signage is a major. I think the gravel on the edges of the work that's been done there, and I certainly think gravel in intersections or some form of work on the intersections and T roads that's there, it'd be a huge improvement to that industrial estate. And yes, there no doubt will perhaps have to be some other ceiling works done there, but I'm not comfortable with the $650,000 when I think that could be scoped and work done there. Perhaps that's not going to cost that amount of money. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. Through you, Acting General Manager, to your staff, the figure of $650,000, Councillor Henson's raised that in terms of scoping and costing. Can you provide us with any further information in relation to that? Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Mayor, through you. Unfortunately, the Manager of Infrastructure Planning is not here, but he has done some background work on this, and the indicative high-level estimations were in the order of 600,000. And because I'm not totally across it, I think, yeah, sometimes the signage may be an easy fix, but what I'm reading here from Manager Darcy is to be legal, allowing legal movements of vehicles in accordance with the National Heavy Vehicles. The compromise in achieving this was around maximising the operation to a one-way through the estate due to the lack of available road width to support the two-way operation through the majority of the Wandai industrial estate. So without the background knowledge of James, that's about as far as I can elaborate, but he did say that the high-level estimate, and it is only a design, a rough design. So the high-level estimate is exactly that, 600,000. It could be a lot more, or it could be a lot less.
Thank you, gentlemen. And just the other point Councillor Henson raised about Burrows Street, two-way there and trucks turning off Burrows. The concept of taking it back to two-way, is there an issue identified there in the report? Any further advice or information on that?
Just bear with me for a minute, Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just want to clarify, I seconded this just to have the conversation, but as that recommendation currently sits, I won't be supporting it simply because Councillor Henson has raised the issue. Now, I'm 100% committed to getting this, and Councillor Duff and I had a meeting down there previously with some of the operators, and particularly the Weybridge operator, and Councillor Henshins acknowledged the fact. Now, listening to what GM Tim has said in regards to what James's comments were, to make it legally able to have manoeuvrement or movement of B doubles through heavy vehicle registration. Now, people need to understand that that's what these engineers that work for council are governed by. They have to make sure that they're compliant with all those legislational regulations, and that was why Wondai Industrial Estate has been produced the way it is. Now, the only way to fix this is, I think it's Burrow Street that comes all the way down. Is that the one that we need to upgrade that to a two-way road? Now, that's what we need to do. Now, I'm fully committed to doing that, but I'm not going to support this motion with just figures. I want to have something in that motion, take out the 650 with full costings coming back, and then we discuss how we fund it. Now, I believe that there may be another little bit of LRCI funding that might be floating around. Certainly fits into that category. That's an option that we can use to fund that, possibly, just a discussion, throwing that out there. We can also look at capital works. Again, Councillor Potter has made a good point with the amount of cash that we're dipping into at the moment, and we need to keep that under mind. But I fully commit to this. It is certainly a lifeline to Wondai. It employs a huge number of people. And I'll also put this out there too, that Parkway, huge business there. I'll just throw out, in the past, we've gone to businesses that they wanted upgraded roads and all that, and I'll mention out here at Sunny Crompton contributed, and Ken Mills, all business owners, and wanted to have upgrades. Maybe that's something to consider, because that's certainly as we know, we put fees on quarries that use our roads to maintain the road network and all that sort of stuff. Maybe a consideration. Not saying we have to do it, but it is a consideration that we could think of. But like I say, fully committed to this, and I believe that the only way to fix it is widen that road, Burrow Street. And yes, there's other options, and it would be an easy fix, but I believe that to make sure that we comply with the National Heavy Vehicle Register, we need to make sure that it meets that legislation. Otherwise, we'll run into problems continually, and it won't happen. So fully commit to it. I won't support this because of the 650. I would like to see that the recommendation has in there that we wait for a full costing to come back, make sure we know the cost before we start, and then work out how we fund it. You know, how that is worded or whatever, whether Councillor Duff would be interested in doing that. But like I say, won't support that with the 650 figure. If it had full costings come back, happy to work out how we fund it. And yes, I do believe it needs to be done in the 22-23 year.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duff, you'll get the right of reply at the end.
No, I was just going to say that I was happy for that amendment.
Okay, we'll hear from Councillor Shoemaker first, and then we'll come back to that point. So you don't want to inform that discussion, Councillor Shoemaker? You want to go that's fine. Go to Councillor Duff first. Okay, so you would need to change the amendment
Happy to
with the consent of the seconder.
Yes.
Okay, we'll look at that, and then we'll get out. I want to confer with our CEO. So, what are we proposing, councillors?
Change the figure to with full costings. Full costings with full costings and to report back as to potential funding options.
So are
within
we
this, yep,
moving, council, that we commit to fund
Yes.
the design and works for the completion of stage 2 within the 22-23 capital works budget with full costings and a report to come back with potential funding options? And do you want to take out that section? I think you can take out from council funds, because we're talking about funding options. And you want to leave with works to include?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, yesterday they were very keen on both Kemp and Burrow Street to fix up everybody's issues. So, yeah, that's why I put that in there.
Okay. Councillor Jones, we'll go to you. Your thoughts on that as a proposed motion? Oh, sorry, Acting General Manager.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I've got that extra information you required. So I've been reading through this stuff. So basically, the works required along Kemp Street extend to the east and north of the intersection with road widening required on the curve. Further works are required in the road widening, are required with road widenings, culvert extensions, table drain realignment, and possible land acquisitions at the Greenwich Street and Burrow Street intersections, and estimated, with the high level estimate of 650, the actual design costs that council would be looking for is in the order of about 35,000 to do that, so that we could get detailed costings.
Thank you very much, Acting General Manager. Okay, so we'll stay with Councillor Jones to consider what you're proposing, Councillor Duff.
Commit to fund the design. That's, well, hearing that 35,000, so that would come back through you, Mr. Mayor, to GM Lowe. That would come back with a full costing. Through the design, obviously, we'd have a full costing.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Yes, correct. So we get the detailed design and we get a comprehensive costing to come back to the council once that's completed.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. Maybe we fund the design and leave the word works out, because down in the bottom we say report to come back with potential funding options with works to include a two-way access to Kemp Burrow Street and improved signage across the industrial estate. Yeah, I guess, yeah, just around that. Like, I'd like to see the design. I'm looking to the CEO for some help here. I'd like to see the design complete, the full costings come back, and then we work out how we fund it, because I will say right now I am committed to this to happen in the 22-23 budget, but how this recommendation reads, Mr. CEO, looking for your help.
Yeah, we'll go to Mr. CEO shortly. Councillor Jones, what if we were to say the council commit to fund the design and then consider works? Or just, and consider funding works? And Mr. CEO, your thoughts?
Mayor, this is fine. Can I just make one small point without having the previous agenda? The reason that we made the recommendation is that we fund the design and then bring the project back to the first quarter review was for this exact purpose. So this will end up in a roundabout sort of a way where we started, which, and I'm pleased I'm not being flippant or cheeky, but yeah, I mean, it's yeah, that's fine. It'll go to the July meeting ordinary, and 35,000 will get on with the design, and certainly appreciate the feedback. And if there's safety elements to it, I too saw, I think, through your request to General Manager Jarvis and grants, the grants coordinator Sanju, there's apparently an extension to the LRCI, so there's some options are coming, and that would be a good discussion as how you fund it. And it certainly is a worthy project, and whatever form it takes, and the design will give guidance on the works. But yeah, no, that's good for me, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. So Councillor Jones, we'll just confirm that you're comfortable with that, and then we'll go back to you, Councillor Duff.
Can we just add in there, listening to the CEO, Mr. Mayor, that at the first quarter review, or do we? Oh, so that's where. So that recommendation reads fine, Mr. CEO. Okay, yeah, I'm happy with that. Yep.
My apologies for not buttoning. It'll give it the head of power to get the works going. So we'll get into it. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Councillor Duff?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy with the wording.
Okay, so we have that motion there now. Councillors, Councillor Schumacher.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to see us add a point in there to negotiate with commercial operators in the area regarding a co-contribution to the project. And I would like to see that added, because that's what we've done with a number of other large commercial entities across our region. a project like this, if I can confirm, the project estimate that we had from July last year was $970,474 that we spent, that we had proposed would be the cost of stage one, and I believe $900,000 come from LRCI. I don't know what the final project actually cost, if we were on budget or under budget or over budget. But anyway, I can take that, I can go and look that up in my own documents. But I guess my thinking is we've spent close to $1 million on stage one. I absolutely believe this is a very important project. I absolutely believe we as a region actually need to be looking at developing the next industrial estate. And I know we have had some discussions with state development around what that could look like, because there is an enormous opportunity for growth in our region. And I absolutely think projects like this are critical to that. I'm not denying that at all, but I do think if that was a new development tomorrow, if you were building a new commercial enterprise like that, you would be expected to make a contribution to the network. And Councillor Jones is very right when he says that, you know, quarries make a significant contribution to our network because they're running trucks in and out all the time. And I'm thinking about our ratepayers. I'm thinking about this is another potentially $650,000 that we spend on an area that's going to benefit a handful of commercial operators who have an opportunity to raise income from their operations. And I completely acknowledge that they too are ratepayers, but I think we've set a standard where we have expected from other significantly large operators in the region to make co-contributions to projects like this. And I think we as a council should open the conversation and the door, because the reality is there may be specific operational needs of the people in that industrial estate that could be met if they were able to make some sort of co-contribution. So I think we should at least give our CEO an opportunity to negotiate with those in the area to see if they would be willing to contribute to the upgrade, being that council has significantly invested in the area, and that you know, the area has been a significant success, is a wonderful story. But yeah, I do think we've set that precedence with other operators, and we need to back that up on this occasion as well. So I won't be supporting this motion unless we're acknowledging that there needs to be a conversation around co-contribution to deliver this project.
Mr. CEO, if we were to include, I mean, obviously this is subject to the mover and seconder's consent, at the end there, Bree, and that council delegate authority to the CEO to negotiate with business stakeholders as to financial contribution. Would that raise concerns with you in terms of that type of motion? Thank you.
Oh, not raise concerns. The only thing, if I was a business owner being practical, I might want to know what it's going to cost me, and so whether that's would be done now or later on down the track. But yeah, so long as it's we can as a first step write to everyone and then let them know that we're looking at. But anyway, yeah, in council's hands, Mayor. Really am.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. We'll stay with you, Councillor Shoemaker. Thank you.
Yes, I guess I'm thinking through the design process that these things will have to happen in sync with each other. And I would like to see us have the conversation up front, start out with the proponents in the industrial estate around, you know, the current situation, what we're looking at. And I think, you know, the final figures, we've got some basic figures which have been in a public report here to council. I know the report that Tim had read is from our June Infrastructure Standing Committee report. So I think it's a place of starting the conversation, and by all means, through that negotiation process, those details, I imagine, would, in my experience in negotiating these sorts of things in the past, those details come to fruition throughout that process. So yes, I think it's important that we start the conversation here with people in that industrial estate about council certainly put skin in the game. What skin can they put in to help us get this project done much more quickly? As they said, they're going to need it because, as Councillor Duff has said, many people are growing. I also just wanted to note my apology for not being able to attend the meeting yesterday morning with business owners. I did see that email come through. By the time I did actually see it come through, Councillor Duff had sent it on Friday and the meeting was for Tuesday, and that just wasn't possible. So just wanted to let landholders in that area know it wasn't because you don't care about them, but the reality is that that wasn't enough time frame to reschedule my morning for that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duff, Councillor Jones, we'll go to you both now. In terms of that change,
True, Mr. Mayor. No, I'm not happy with that because it says with potential funding options, which covers off on it. I think that we need to get the costings before we go to the business owners. I think, as the CEO suggested, that would be wise because otherwise they will get their backs up straight away. We need to get the costings, find out what the design's going to look like, and then go to the, if we can't fund it ourselves, if we think it's too much or whatever, then we go to the business stakeholders, not up front. I'm not in favour of that.
okay, so thank you, Bree. All right. Okay, yeah, further speakers. Councillor, who was next? Councillor Potter? Thank you.
When you had that sentence up before with regards to financial contribution, I'm just wondering whether that should have been, we should have actually changed that to land acquisition information, because there was talk that there, especially on that one corner, that there may be needed land acquisitions. So maybe it should actually have something along those lines in there, whether that's done under our talks of how it's funded, but, you know, that's something that we need to discuss as well.
It's a good point. Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Erkins.
Bearing in mind that not all of the not all the tenants or the owners out there will actually be interested in funding if it doesn't affect them. If they can operate with it just going one way, it's not going to affect them, so they may not be prepared to contribute, whereas some, you know, it will only affect some people. Bearing in mind that normally when a subdivision is done, it's normally, and people make contribution, it's normally the person who's doing the development that makes the contribution, and then they sell it to the buyers done.
Councillor Schumacher.
Yes, completely understand the comments made. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And, you know, I'm in business myself. I know very well if someone was going to pay for something to improve my opportunity to grow my business and I didn't have to put money up, I wouldn't come willingly to the table. I would, however, come willingly to the table if it was having a direct impact on my business and I identified that and I actually needed to do something about that. I absolutely would come to the table. And I think we've seen major businesses in our region do just that, where they've said, this is a problem, it's impacting on me, I'm willing to help invest in sharing the costs. And I guess my thinking is, we're talking here about, you know, potentially another $650,000. It's a wonderful project. And from all of the things I have seen here in this chamber, there is a long list of wonderful projects. I know we had the discussion around designing it was going to be a challenge for our team. We would have to get somebody externally to do the design. I think that's important so that we get the full costings. But I think this project, I'm not willing to commit to delivering this project within the 22-23 year without knowing, A, if the business owners in that area are actually willing to make a contribution or at least have that conversation to getting the works done. And B, yes, there might be some LRCI. Yes, we've got some money in the bank. I can see, you know, the certainly the luring nature to just let's do this one. The reality is, from everything I've learned, there's a whole long list of projects that need to be done. And I think when we're having those conversations, we need to look at the pipeline, consider all aspects, and pick a project based on that. I'm gone are the days, Councillor Jones just said it, and I've learned some very valuable lessons in this chamber. I'm not signing sort of empty checks, committing to delivering on a project when I don't know how much it's going to cost, when I haven't had any information about LRCI funding or opportunities for that. I'm not comfortable with that conversation until I have all of that information. So I'm not committing to to funding the works next year when there are so many variables that I don't know. So I will not support this project, not because I don't support the Wandai Industrial Estate. I think it's a wonderful project. I think the businesses in them, I'm so grateful for the work they do in our community. But I do think there's got to be a bigger picture conversation here. And I do think that just sort of signing checks to say we're going to fund and commit to projects when we don't understand the costs and how that implicates on our cash budget or the capital works budgets that we have. If we do this project, it does mean we're not doing something else, and I want to understand all of those things before I commit to delivering on it. That's the reason why I won't support it here today.
Okay, Councillor Jones? Yeah.
Yeah, just thank you, Mr Mayor. Just quickly, I'm comfortable with the way that reads. It says we commit to fund the design and then we consider funding the work. So we're not committing to funding the works, we're committing to the design, which will bring back the full costings. And when I referred to a bit of co-contribution, and I mentioned Parkside, specifically for me, Kemp Street, because that's the one that's going to affect, and that's a major user of Kemp Street. Is that correct? I'm happy to. So Kemp Street, and with Councillor Erkins saying that all the other, that was what I was specifically meaning, not necessarily chasing all the other owners in there for co-contribution or whatever, but I know that Parkside is a big contributor to heavy vehicle movements in there, and but that was where I was specifically aiming with co-contribution. But I'm happy with that design, that motion. I will support it simply because we're committing to the fund, to design, and then we consider funding the work. So there's future discussions around whether or not we fund it. So I'm happy to support that today.
Further speakers before we go to Councillor Duff for concluding comments? No? Over to you, Councillor Duff, to conclude the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just really keen to support this motion, and hope the chamber supports it, because I do think it covers off on everything that's been discussed, with potential funding options to be discussed as well. So all of those things can come out once we've got the design, and people can see, particularly the business owners can see, you know, the benefits of how it's going to look, and then we can have some further discussions, but really keen to support this. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Erkins, Duff, Jones, Potter, Henson and Otto. Those against? Councillor Shoemaker. Thank you all. Okay. Oh, yes, sorry, Mr. CEO, I often forget that one. So the amendment now becomes the resolution. Okay. So do we have to seek a move? No, so we carry that through, Mr. CEO, do we? We deal with it again. So there's another opportunity to debate, because process is such that the amendment is now the substantive resolution. Is there anything further to add to the debate? No? Councillor Shoemaker, thank you.
Yes, I do want to note that when we're saying considering funding, that's actually sort of saying that we're going to, we're committing to this project in the 22-23 Roads Capital Works budget in some way or another. And I'm not comfortable with that without having all information in front of me. And I know how tight that 22-23 Capital Works budget is already. That's the reason for not supporting this. It's not that I don't support the project. I just would like more detail. I don't like making decisions without full detail and an opportunity to fully understand the process forward. And I think we're really missing an opportunity here to have a conversation through this process, to be upfront, to be honest. Everyone talks about community engagement. The reality is community engagement should be on the front foot. We should be saying, we're doing this work. We'd love to have a conversation with you around a contribution. Would you consider it? And I think that sort of designing something, then looking at funding it, we're sort of saying we're going to do it in this budget. I don't know, it's grey and vague for me, and I'm not willing to support a grey and vague motion.
Further speakers? Councillor Duff?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't think the motion's grey and vague. I think it's very clear. We're going to consider the funding once we've done the design and costings. I think even the CEO expressed some concern about going out to the community not knowing what was on offer, what the costs were going to be, and I just think that it's very well worded, and I'm keen to support it. Thank you.
Okay, happy to take those as concluding comments. Go to the vote. Those in favour? Okay, got that, Bree. Councillor Erkins, Duff, Jones, Potter, Henson and Otto. Those against? Councillor Shoemaker. Thank you all. That's been carried. Okay. Next item. Sorry. Yes, Councillor Henson. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, could I just make note, maybe a question on notice, or if a motion needs to be moved, happy to do that. But this, when we've talked, and then it's yesterday, you expressed that gravel on that stage 1 project. It hasn't been done, and I'd like to see that be moved as a priority, because if we don't do something with those edgings on that stage 1 project, we will be back there fixing that great work that's been done down there. There's currently many places with a 200 mil plus drop off there. That to me, and as you suggested yesterday, Mr Mayor, do we have a projection on that as to what's happening, or can we make that happen? Like, we will be fixing it.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Henson. It is a big concern for the community down there.
Through you, Mayor, apparently we've got that actually in our program. It's just been delayed by the wet weather.
So once the weather dries up, we're expecting that work will then commence.
Yes, Mayor.
Yeah, you're happy with that, Councillor Henson, today?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. That will be a pleasant project that be completed, because it is creating some issues. And like I said, it'd be such a disappointment to see those edges of that roadway start to deteriorate. Yeah, I think that's just a given that as soon as it can dry out, it does dry out. Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Henson. Okay, so 6.6, let's keep moving, get through this. 6.6 fleet review at 75. Thank you, Manager.
Through you, Mayor. Yes. So earlier in the year, around April budget meeting, Mayor, senior executive team was asked to consider further reduction in the white fleet. We're able to do so without impacting adversely on the services to communities. So to that end, we have got Jed engaged to do a little bit of work for us on that, and I'd like to hand over to him to give a summary of what he's found.
Thank you and welcome, Jed.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and thank you for having me back again. I will be quite brief, noting the introduction by the Mayor. The report is for noting. The highlights of the report, which was prepared primarily with Anthony's team's information and the support right across the operational areas of Council in each department, identifies the progress made towards reducing the white fleet to an optimum level. There's a number of components of that report, which I'm sure Council has read. The key take-home in relationship to that report is that Council is, with its near 20% reduction over the 2021 year, very conservatively resourced in relationship to white fleet. Further to that, there is some comparative work done just to give Council some comfort across comparative councils. And interestingly, despite our relatively conservatively small number of white fleet, we don't have quite the same level of fleet truck resources that many of the comparative councils have. So the numbers that we have probably belie a little bit the resources of other councils, given they have that 4 to 6 tonne crew truck as a common vehicle used for transport of people and light equipment per fleet. I think, Mayor, that's a quick summary. It also gives you the information which updates you from the Merrill request for information back in October to our current situation, and it also provides you the operational justification on each class of white vehicle right across the organisation. So that's been done in a fair bit of depth in preparing the budget and ensuring that we've achieved, or nearly completely achieved, that target that General Manager Jarvis presented in her RFI back in October. Thank you.
Thank you, Jed. So the recommendation is that council note the report for information and that the Chief Executive Officer will continue the implementation of the recommendations of the Plant and Fleet Review Report 2021. Do we have a mover? Councillor Shoemaker, thank you. Seconded, Councillor Henson. Speakers? Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, thank you for the comprehensive report. Excellent report, and yeah, I don't have any questions, to be honest. It was very comprehensive in the process that's been undertaken, and to see that benchmarking of us against other councils and noting the differences in services as well. I think those light rigid crew trucks, that may be something we need to consider, you know, as we consistently look at reviewing our fleet every year. But no, I was really grateful for the report. I was just going to ask, on page 85, we've got the patrol grading resources report in the agenda. And this I really did enjoy. I think there's quite a lot in that report to unpack, the different options. And I know we've discussed, you know, on our road trip around the region, we were looking a lot at drainage. Do we need to consider a small drainage crew? You know, should we consider shifting, adding a roller? I know we've had conversations about that to one of our greater fleets to get better compaction when we're out. These are really relevant questions that I don't think we fully have the answers to, and I think the work you've done here around looking at the day, the hours of productive time, the hours of unproductive time, I'd really like to unpack these 2 pages here, 85 and 86. And I guess I was just going to propose either in the motion or whether I needed to put another motion on the table, but that we actually workshop this report at a future date, because I think there's some real wins, or certainly some better understanding to be had through this report. And I don't think we have the time here today to fully unpack it, Mr. Mayor. So I guess that we note the report and that the Chief Officer will continue the implementation of recommendations of the Plant and Fleet report. And then secondary to that, and that a workshop is scheduled to review the patrol grading resources report and discuss future opportunities with council. I thought it was really relevant. So certainly I'd like to add that, with Councillor Henson's permission, to the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Henson, you comfortable with that? Thank you. Okay. Further speakers? Councillor Duff?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just in response to the email that was sent to all councillors from General Manager Jarvis on council hiring utes, there was a email, I don't know if every councillor read it, about the fact that 2 utilities were hired by council on the 14th of the 10th, 2021, and were kept until the last working week in December. One utility was for property and one was for a temporary building inspector. The cost of both vehicles for the 2-month period was $17,265.60. Total cost back to the department in internal hire rates, if council vehicles were used instead, would have been $10,465.20. So I'm just thinking of a dot point, because council made that recommendation to reduce the fleet, and then that caused, unbeknownst to us, that we then hired some fleet. I just think that there should be a dot point, that a report be brought back prior to any further hiring of white fleet, because if we keep, I just think that we should have known about that, because then that informs us as to whether or not we've made a good decision. So yeah, just concerned about it.
Might get Mr. CEO, would you? Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate the thought, Councillor, and I wouldn't label blame on anyone. The hiring a fleet, depending on flood or COVID or a range of things, will be sometimes for the cost of it to buy 2 utes would have been, what would be 40, 50K, 100,000 to buy 2 utes for a short-term use is $17,000 to hire them for a period of time, way better value than it is to buy 2 utes that then you're going to sell in 6 months' time because they're surplus. So the hiring of utility or the hiring of fleet at any point in time will really depend on operational need and if we've, in some circumstances. So I wouldn't think, I'm just looking how best to explain it, but in my own mind, I just think if your question is, do we want to do a report to council on every time we want to hire a piece of plant? No. And its operational need will dictate the hiring of it. And whether it's a purchase of a piece of fleet or a hire of a piece of fleet, it really should come back down to best value. And that should be the driving principle.
Mr. CEO, just in there where we've got that you'll continue to work with the implementation of the recommendations from that review, would that then be a body of work where you'd start to look at these sorts of issues and say, well, is there an opportunity to continue or even further across departments, share fleet into the future?
Yes, short answer, for time and that premise certainly there's no disagreement with the intent of council is just chasing best value all the time.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Councillor Duff, anything further before we go to Councillor Erkins?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I was just concerned about that. I just got feedback that it was a direct impact of the decisions that we'd made, and that we'd forced them to the staff to actually hire vehicles. So it was just I was just flagging that because that's why that was asked. And that email came back because that was the talk, and just concerned about the we're all a team working together, and just didn't want us to just make these decisions and then that then caused a reaction that was probably not desirable. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further from the officers before we move on? You're comfortable with that? Councillor Erkins, over to you. Thank you.
That was probably going to be my question. I wasn't here when you decided on that, but I was going to ask did you hire them because you didn't have enough? Was it a cause of the vehicles that council had decided that we didn't need?
Thank you.
Through you.
Yeah, thanks, General Manager.
Possibly some background into hiring those 2 vehicles. So we did have, as we said, the 2 vehicles. One was a building certifier that we had, and it was really just an unavailability of fleet vehicles at the time. We've got 2 vehicles. 2 of the fleet vehicles tied up with acting managers that would normally be in the fleet that weren't available. So at that time, there just wasn't an availability of a fleet vehicle, and having a building inspector sitting in the office is a bigger waste than hiring the vehicle. And the other one was, it was one of the project in the property team. We did rationalise the vehicle that officer was using because it's not needed all the time, and he can use one of the other vehicles. But we had a particular issue with the pool over that time. It was required to Kingaroy Pool had major leaks, and we had investigation. So he was doing a couple of projects needed a lot of on-site project management at the time. So they were sort of needed at that time, and fleet, because we had possibly, I don't know if there was flood damage, but I know of 2 vehicles that were out of the fleet pool at the time that would normally be available, that just weren't available over that time. So it was a sort of specific time in thing. It is when you'd have got, I suppose, at low fleet vehicles, you run into that balance, but then you don't want a whole heap of fleet vehicles sitting in the depot not being used. So yeah, just a balance that we're just required to manage.
Thank you, General Manager. Anything further, councillors? Councillor Jones.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, through you, just comment made there by Councillor Duff. It's a bit concerning to me about the talk going around about the decisions that we made in the chambers and the adverse effect out in the community. I'd just be interested to see where that talk was coming from, or where you got that feedback, because that's concerning to hear that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duff, any further for the committee?
It was actually, I don't want to throw Councillor General Manager Jarvis under the bus, but she did mention to me that that had occurred, that we'd hired vehicles. And so I was just a bit, concerned about that comment, and then, and also then this report here, and I just wanted to unpack what all that meant. That was all.
Okay, I think we've probably had enough discussion around this, and clearly it's been explained that there are good reasons for that happening at that time. Thank you, Mr. CEO. So, okay, let's move forward. Shall we go to the vote on this one? Those in favour? Carry unanimously. Thank you all. 7.1 is the Water and Wastewater Portfolio Report at page 90, and it is recommended that the Water and Wastewater Portfolio Report to Council be received for information. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Hanshin. Seconded, Councillor Jones. Of course, noting that we don't have officially a portfolio holder at this stage. We'll go to speakers. Is there any speakers? Any questions or comments? Yep, Councillor Hanshin, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, no, look, one that interests me always, and it's great to see our water levels at 100%, 99%, as I stated earlier on this morning. The Boyne River and the Stewart River and the Drummond Creeks are running with this recent rain event. So that will be all heading towards the Burndoomba Dam as well to keep it topped up. And in this time of the year, that rain is again unprecedented. So yeah, it's looking fantastic finally that our water storages will be replenished.
Thank you, Councillor. General Manager, just on page 92, I can see there with the Barker Bramber, just where it says subtotal in that table, usage to date 452 megalitres. Well, this is up to the 23rd of June. Total allocation 1,750, which left 1,298 megalitres. So there's quite a bit of allocation left there. We've got that that old meatworks site in Mergen. It's potentially could lend itself to industrial estate, or who knows, whatever comes up through some planning into the future. Would there be possibility that some of that water, or how much of that water, could potentially be allocated there? Because I imagine that some of that you'd keep aside for contingencies, wouldn't you? You wouldn't be able to, you can't free up all that allocation, but is there an estimate as to what sort of allocation could be available to be freed up if we had growth on that network?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. That's essentially the existence or the pre-existence of the meatworks is where that allocation has actually come from, pretty well. And so the answer is yes. We wouldn't give over allocation, but we use that allocation for those type of industries. Yeah.
Thank you, General Manager. Any further speakers? Well, comfortable with that? Shall we go to the vote? Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. 7.2, Emergency After Hours Call Service and LDMG Overview at 95. Mr. CEO, did you want to give us an introduction? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. This is a consolidation of several questions. General Manager Meehan is actually ill, so he would have otherwise been here today as well, and certainly Acting General Manager Tim has got the report to this point. Yeah, it covers a range of different areas, Mayor. Certainly, we have the operation. It picked up Councillor Duff's point about the operation of the after-hours call centre. The responsibility operation of the chair, where the system sits, the head of power between all the different things, and rather than me reading the entire, Mayor, probably happy to answer questions if that's fine. But certainly also for Councillor's information, we have also had direct conversations with Peak about their services as well, as far as when there's a declared event as opposed to rain like we've had the last few days. So there is the standing up of the council, LDC, the Local Disaster Centre, for a declared event is a fairly easy task, but where you get several days of rain and there's no declared event, that's quite different. And with utilisation of external services, certainly there has been a couple of conversations with Peak about service levels and the quality of that service.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Thank you to you and your staff for providing this comprehensive report. So we have a recommendation that the committee recommends to council that council note the report and that the Chief Executive Officer engage with council's after-hours call centre provider in relation to council's concerns regarding delays in service during wet weather events. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Potter. Seconder, Councillor Erkins. And I will acknowledge, Mr. CEO has said, there has already been some engagement in this space. Any further speakers? Councillor Duff, thank you.
Through Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. CEO, for that feedback. But I just can't work out why we wouldn't, like, we go through the peak services and every time there's a disaster, this has happened. And I know you had the conversations, but that must be at a fair cost to have peak services managing our after hours. But I'm just, and I did have the conversation with General Manager Meehan about this, about why couldn't we make it a policy that we do convert to our local disaster team to coordinate those responses. And I can't see why it would be such an onerous matter when it's about like having someone that's the person, because we used to have that service where we just had, you know, the roads, it went through, if you pressed one it was roads, it was something else. I just think in a disaster that we need to get away from that overarching body, which frustrates our community, because they want to be able to know that it's gone through to such and such. And peak services is only just doing that in any case. They're just putting it to the road. We've already got those people on call. So why couldn't it be our local disaster coordinator doing that as opposed to some body that the locals and everyone's got to deal with?
Thank you, Mr. CEO.
All right, so there's two different events. So we've had I don't know what everyone else has had, but we've measured 54 mil since probably Thursday night at home, which has been glorious rain. Our backyard's a bog. It's not a declared event, so we wouldn't activate a call centre or bring staff in on overtime and run them from. Well, what period do you run them from 8 to 5 on a Saturday and Sunday, or do you do night time, or do you do another rain event where we're a declared event and we stand up the local disaster committee? That's when we do, and we switch over. So suppose there's by different language, we're in agreements that where it's a declared event, we swing into our own resources. This year's been a little bit odd with the wide ranging of it. The reason we went to peak in the first place a couple of years ago, we had a look at a couple of different providers, and certainly out of the process, peak works with neighbouring councils. We know them. Their association with LGAQ as an industry body is that we don't run a 24/7, so we wouldn't be able to run a 24/7 during. So the normal after hours. And you get the call back and there's a certain range of services they provide to us. Yes, they pass them on, but I'm looking for a better word than we don't have the bodies, but to bring people in and then manage the fatigue and the roster on the weekend to have people for 365 days a year, we don't have the capacity to deliver that service, hence peak. But if we're talking about a declared event, so tropical cyclone Fred comes across the border again, yeah, absolutely. Fire up the LDC. Well, I won't say the only, but one of the things is when the LDC, and then we bring staff in. It's paid overtime. It's a whole raft of things. But even then, running, depending on the nature of the event, we wouldn't run 24/7, as in 24 hours a day, dependent on the nature of the event. So there would be some need for some sort of an after-hour service of some form. But long-winded and probably sounds awkward. But yeah, so where there's a declared event or a declared rain event or a declared natural disaster, the LDC fires up, the LDMG fires up, everything whirs into life, move into a local-based service. Where it's a 54 mil over 3 days, like the current, where it's not a declared event, we'd be unlikely to switch across to a local service. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Councillor Duff.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy with that. I didn't realise. I thought from the report that you were saying it's not doable, but you're saying that you would move into a local report, local service, sorry, I misunderstood it.
You're right, councillor, and that was there was a fair bit of internal discussion about when people say about a rain event. We've had a rain event, which is and it's been well prosecuted here this morning. And again, I'll use our backyard. It is an absolute roast paddy. The amount of water with 54 mils, normally it just gets sucked up and you don't see it. We're just an absolute roast paddy. Would we fire up a specific service for this? Not normally. But if, again, I'm make it up and be flippant, but Tropical Cyclone Fred comes across the coast and it's going to be a declared event, absolutely, like the LDC gets fired up and we pull people in and we pull whatever resources we can in to not only run the coordination centre, but we can switch to the phones. So the only hesitation I have is that as night is if you've got people running all day, at some point you need to switch over to another service as well. But yeah, for declared disaster events, that local, I think the other aspect of the local services is talking is that people know the road names and they know the area. And that's not a criticism of the other services, but you get some odd pronunciations and interpretations of little localities.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Where were we? I think, Councillor Potter, you had yours on first, though. You can't. I want to go back to Councillor Potter. Thank you,
Well,
Councillor.
actually, CEO Mark said most of the things that I was going to say with regards to the LDMG. And, you know, we always do bring on the call centre if need be through a disaster, so that is always pulled up. So it just probably for you, Councillor Duffett, you didn't think it happened fast enough. So, but, you know, to try and get people on call, I think would be the hardest thing for us as a council. You know, it's bad enough when we have our phones 24/7, but to ask a staff member to have their phone 24/7 is a completely different thing, and we have to pay them all that extra money. So I think the costings there would be a lot greater than what we're actually paying now.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, who was next for the speakers? Councillor Eccles, thank you.
So can I just, I'm not really clear on what happens. So in a normal no disaster, I've got a burst pipe out in the street, I ring council, who answers?
So if it's office hours, it goes through to the switch. If it's outside office hours or weekend, it goes through. We have a service provider, which is Peak Services, and they look after hours call. They'll take your details and contact number, and if you had a burst pipe, or it's a water pipe, or depending on what sort of service it is, they will then relay that message to the on-call person. So we have staff on call. There are a range of different service levels. Dogs cause some degree of consternation because if it's a non-dangerous dog and they see a dog walking down the street, for the cost of a 3-hour call out and overtime and we won't necessarily send someone to that, but the guys will follow it up on Monday. If it's an overgrown allotment on a Saturday, for example, again, the cost of addressing it on the Saturday as opposed to the Monday is just prohibitive. So there are some delays. But if it was the pipes burst, there's a massive hole in the road and someone's going to die, it would then go through to the after hours on-call staff, and then they'd relay that through. So there's a range of scripts for different services.
So do the call centre actually screen what calls are important to be dealt with straight away, and what calls can wait till?
They have a range of instructions about what to do what with.
So on here on your thing where it said the wait times for 15 to 20 minutes, that has been addressed, has it?
Yeah, is that, which page are you on, Councillor? Was that within
99.
the 99? Is that within the?
It says they acknowledge the feedback.
Yeah.
Times.
So partly there was, without going too much into history, there was an issue between the two systems when we first started, and what was happening was the call would actually be redirect to our, so the call would come in, it'd relay through, this is 12, 18 months ago, 2 years ago, 2 years, and then it'd relay back to, when it didn't get picked up in the daisy wheel, it'd relay back to our system, and of course there's no one monitoring our system, so it'd daisy wheel to the phones. So that was addressed. The ones there with the Southeast Queensland rain event, which the 15, 20 minutes applied to, for example, we were flooding, Brisbane was flooding, and they were just congested, they were overwhelmed.
Yeah. Because
So,
I think that is one of, I mean, when
Yeah.
something is happening, like that's really when people need to be able, you know, to
And that's where the agreement of and certainly Councillor Potter's comment is correct, is about how fast we switch over into that service. That's probably a fair discussion, is with the council and the LDMG, and also getting that localised service. Then we don't want to also set up a system here where we create the same problem, where we've got two people answering phones and we put someone on hold for 20 minutes while we're sorting out the other problem. But yeah, with that Southeast Queensland rain event, those call times, and it has been passed on, those call times were too long.
okay,
Just
thanks.
plain too long.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Let's wrap this up. We'll go, oh, sorry. Oh,
Oh, sorry,
Over to
through
you,
you, Mayor.
Acting
I was just going to add to CEO's comments. When we do switch back to local, that means that we then assume the on-call for the water and wastewater, because that goes through peak services 365 days a year. So then that puts more work back onto the local disaster management group then as well.
thank you, Acting GM. We ready to go to the vote on this? Yep. Those in favour? Carry unanimously. Thank you all. Final item on the agenda, 8.1, questions on notice at 106, where it's recommended that the responses to the questions raised be received and noted. Do we have a mover? Yes, Councillor Potter. Second, Councillor Jones. Thank you. Speakers? Acting General Manager, if I could, just in relation to question 4, the question there was specifically Kingaroy water storage. Do we have enough megs stored to meet the 3 days supply of water? I don't know if I read that correctly, but is that a yes or a no? Sorry.
Yeah, so essentially...
I appreciate the work you put in. It was a very good comprehensive answer, but...
Yeah. Thanks, Mayor. So if we went to our the additional 5 meg, yes, we would. The answer is yes. At the current point in time, no.
Okay, thank you. Excellent, thank you. Yes, 5 was right. 6, Councillor Henson. Okay. Nothing further, councillors? We all comfortable with those responses? Sorry, Councillor Duff?
I just wanted to know on question 7, it says that the cost would be 1.8 million. Just wanted to know how that could possibly be. It's about 400 metres, I believe, from the peanut silos to the netball courts. And it says 1.8 million is the estimate. Just wondering how that could be.
Thank you, Councillor. While Acting GM's having a look at that, I did have General Manager Meehan has given me some information into this, in that this is the area behind the peanut silos that runs up towards the netball courts, and we'll hand over to Kev shortly, but this is something, as everyone knows, I'm quite passionate about having fixed, and my bubble was burst when I saw the cost because of the underground water that flows down through that area. But that we've got Kevin in the room, we'll hand over to you. Thank you, Manager. So we're on question 7 there, Manager Searle, in relation to the pavement rehab and strengthening with the subsurface draining improvements required at that section from the peanut silos up to the netball courts on Alfred Street East. Thank you, Manager.
Yep, so the estimate there is $1.8 million, and that was based on costs that we're getting from the work that we're doing just next door, which is in the KTP. So that's a full reconstruction. So you have a cement treated base, followed by our EME asphalt, and then overlaying with an AC surface layer, very similar to some of the road profiles that we have in the KTP, and that's a full width subsoil drainage on the basis that there may be some improvements, some issues there with the drainage, and that's going essentially from the pedestrian crossing back down to the median the parking lanes in the middle, just down from the silos. So that's it's a full reconstruction essentially, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Major. I did probably mislead the chamber there, the council. It's actually from the pedestrian crossing near PCA back down, so heading back west towards the KTP. Is that correct? It's that short section there. Yep.
That's correct. So it's beyond Somerset, and I suppose halfway between Somerset and Short Street, as
Yes.
roughly. Yep.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, Councillor Duff, does that address your question? Back to you.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, just how far roughly would that be? Because like the double lane road on the Dubba Road, the quote was to upgrade it to double lane, single lane is $1 million a kilometre. So I'm just, is it more than a kilometre, or is it almost 2 kilometres, or how far is it to warrant that kind of figure?
It's not a kilometre long, no. Just offhand, I can't say, but it does. The width of the road is wider than say a standard 2-lane road. You've got some parking areas on as it comes around the little S bend there, but again, it is based on the road designs that we've used in Alfred Street next door, as well as Haley Street and Kingaroy Street, under the expectation that you would get a similar type of subgrade material and similar issues with the pavement performing. So again, it's quite a significant pavement compared to, say, one that you might get on a rural road, for example.
Thank you, Manager.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Schumacher.
Yes, I just wanted to confirm the other end of Alfred Street, which was in the KTP footprint, it had, I think if I can remember the right term you use, spoilt clays or rotten clays, or there was something around the underlying road base on the other end of Alfred Street. And I was just wondering, would there be, based on what we're discussing around water underneath, like that could be a big reason why the cost would be so high, because you would have to remove all that material underneath and then build it back up again? Would that be a similar situation to what we did down this end?
Thanks, Manager.
Yep, so in Alfred Street, from memory, there were two sections that we did. The very first section that we did in Alfred Street had a profile of EME, asphalt, and then a topping of the asphalt running surface. And what we found was, without treating the subgrade, we've had construction difficulties. So in that second section of Alfred Street, there was cement treated base, which provided a better foundation for the machinery, but also addressed some of those subgrade issues. And that's a similar sort of approach to this costing here.
Thank you, Manager. Yeah, it's really, I guess, something we need to give consideration to in terms of how we also communicate this to the community, because that section of road, as those of us Kangaroo councillors, we know, carries thousands of cars every morning and every afternoon, and it really is very, very rough to go through there in almost to the centre of Kingaroy, but symptomatic of the water table upon which Kingaroy was built, unfortunately. Yeah, but looking forward to having further conversations into the future. If there's no further speakers, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Thanks everyone for your engagement today, and we'll now call the meeting to a close. Have a wonderful rest of the day.